I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should I just go down the items, or should I just let you take it away?
Yeah, I think it's right into the plan group.
All right, take it away, sir.
Well, good evening. Thank you for meeting early. Thank you for your patience. This is really a follow-up to our last conversation. We have more of these study sessions planned, but this is really phase 2 of our initial working groups with the Planning Commission, in which we are presenting our initial drafts of the various updates that we're performing to the development code. So here's just a rundown of how we're going to go through this item tonight. We're first going to go over some of the community stakeholder and feedback, community engagement feedback that we've received to date, as that really informed a lot of the decisions and some of the recommendations that are in the draft. Then we'll dive into the zoning district provisions, and we'll review the draft that we have in front of you. We'll go over some of the major highlights, some of the recommendations that are more substantial in change. And then we have a series, like last time, we have a series of questions for you based on some of the topics that we're hoping to flesh out, get a little more feedback in order so we can bring another draft back to you that is in line with what you're looking for. And then we'll end tonight with just going over next steps and what you can expect from us going forward. So as mentioned, really this is our phase 2 of our working sessions. We're breaking up the drafting portion of this update into 3 phases. Last time we met with you, we were going over the administrative provisions. So we were looking at your entitlements, fees, processing, procedures. We like to do that first because it kind of sets the baseline of, okay, what are the expectations for entitlements and review criteria? And then we like to pair that up then promptly after with going into your zoning district and use provisions specifically. So that's where we get down to the zones, allowable land uses, entitlements and permits for each of those land uses. And then we dive into standards for specific land uses as well. So the real intent of this phase is to address the standards that really implement the comprehensive plan and support orderly growth and development. And it does that through development standards and zoning regulations. This phase really consists of 3 chapters: the zoning district and use regulations in 1204, chapter 1206, which is the accessory and temporary use provisions, and then the definitions, which is 1230. We will be bringing 1230 back to you again, but because we've added some land uses, as you'll see, and we've made some modifications to the definitions, we're at least bringing an initial draft to you, just because it will really help inform you as to what we're talking about when we're mentioning different types of uses in the tables that we'll go through tonight. Before we do that, though, as I had mentioned, in addition to the feedback that you've provided us thus far, in addition to working with staff, we've also gone through a really big effort of getting community engagement and stakeholder feedback. And that was really essential, is essential to every step in this project and really essential to this particular phase. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it off to Brent real quick. We had a slide in here, I'm not sure where it is, but just to provide an overview of some of the engagement that we've conducted to date, talk a little bit about the stakeholder feedback and maybe how and what we'll see that transpire in some of the rest of the recommendations we've made.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that a lot of the changes that are out for consideration are floating concepts by the Planning Commission that we've talked with city staff about. Would like your opinion and weigh in on these issues and opportunities are tied back directly to feedback that we've received through the process. So when it comes to stakeholder interviews, we spoke with members of the development community that work here within Middletown or within the region that made recommendations on best practice as it pertains to development coming in, whether it's residential or commercial. And as part of that, we started to reflect some potential modifications or adjustments to your development standards, really getting into minimum parcel sizes, height, square footage allotments for certain dwelling typologies, single family, multifamily, and so forth. In conjunction with the stakeholder interviews, we had that survey that went out at the end of last year. So 284 responses came in on that survey, which is relatively high. There were a series of questions that we asked related to how the community felt about the current standards, the character that is being emulated through the development standards as they're currently presented in your development code. What other types of uses would the community like to see? Residential, for example, we did start to float the topic of accessory dwelling units, which we'll talk about tonight. I can say that from the accessory dwelling units, it was a mixed bag, so 279 people responded to that. About 43% said they were interested in learning more about it. 26% said, no way, we don't wanna open that door. And then you had the 31, I'm not quite sure, I need some more information on it. So a pretty mixed bag. Accessory dwelling units are still a new and emerging topic. And so you'll notice that in the draft before you, we don't really get into any specificity quite yet. We felt that we wanted to vet out the conversation and the comfortability with the planning commission before we drafted anything, if we draft anything. There might be, as part of the discussion, might be that's something that we're not interested in considering quite yet. Perfect, and that's the dialogue that we want to have. Interesting to note, we did ask questions that pertain to different types of housing that the community would want to see that may not be allowed as of right now. Pretty evenly divided out of 1,300 responses, and that's more than 284, but you have the ability to select all different kinds of housing types. Small lot, single family actually rose to the top. More compact development, typically small lot, compact development is more affordable. Right now, the development standards, as you have them in the development code, don't allow that without having a plan development that allows the creativity to go beyond what you have. And so in the standards, we will talk about proposed modifications to try to not have everything go down to PD process, to try to expand flexibility where applicable, and we'll run that by the planning commission. There was also 191 comments that were just submitted, just open box, free-flowing thoughts. I will say a lot of this is not applicable that came in to the development code. We also find that sometimes these are venting areas for people to talk about what they like and what they don't like, may not be zoning related. But there were some things I thought was interesting that came out of it. There was a common theme when the responses were development code related that talked about flexibility. Flexibility for development overall linked to economic development. There was notations from several individuals that noted that other areas surrounding seem to be booming economically, Middletown isn't, and that could be linked to the standards in your current code. Not saying that's correct, right, or wrong, just bringing out what we're hearing as part of this. Preserving residential neighborhood integrity and character, explicitly stated. Great to have alternative housing types, but don't disrupt what the neighborhood fabric is and try to maintain that. And I think that really gets down to multifamily and when you start introducing attached products into traditional single family neighborhoods. Yes, it is a different feel than what's been there, and that was some concerns. Discussion of infill housing, the type of housing, the architecture, the materials, not a shocker on that. Just to take another look at the design standards that the city currently has. And then there was a lot of comments about downtown and commercial uses and just trying to create an environment that complements the development that's occurring on the east end and kind of bookends the community. Right now, some comments are saying the east end's getting all the new development, what about downtown? I know there's been several planning efforts over the years focused on downtown, but it's obviously still an important aspect that at least we're hearing through these comments. Now again, this is a pool of only 284 out of a community of 50,000 plus, so just keep that in mind, but I do think it does give a good general feedback of what we're hearing. We are sifting through all of this information while preparing this. The Planning Commission will get a copy of this, So you'll get a copy of everything verbatim that was stated, and it will go out for public consumption, so it will go out on the website as well. But that just gives you a flavor.
Thanks, Brent. So I wanted to have Brent touch on those pieces because you'll start to see that a lot of that feedback influenced in our recommendations and edits. So we have 3 chapters that I want to get through. I'd say the heaviest, it's going to take us the most time is 1204. So we have a series of slides to get through just to kind of provide you an overview, hopefully a quick overview of all that we've changed, but there have been some pretty large changes. And then we'll work through the other chapters. The way that I've structured this is I just want to briefly talk about the purpose of this chapter so we're all on the same page, briefly talk about the contents, and then I'll provide an overview of the recommendations. So specifically 1204 and the provisions therein are intended to guide development citywide by establishing zoning districts. And then inside those zoning districts, you have your allowable land uses. Those districts will then specify development standards. And then within 1204, you also have all of the standards for specific land uses. So it's a really hefty chapter. It's probably the most referenced of, I would say, the chapters by the everyday code user using the code. As far as contents are concerned, it starts off with some introductory language to the zoning districts. It talks about if there are conflicts with a boundary line. It gets into some procedures that people can submit requests as far as zoning verification letters, kind of just some introductory text. But the main portion of this chapter starts off with purpose statements for each of your zoning districts, which we crafted and we retooled. Then that is followed by your primary permitted land uses, that is broken up by zoning districts. That is then followed by land use specific standards. That ties back to that table, as you're all aware. And then that is followed by your development standards for each of your zones. So I'll start kind of from top to bottom at the beginning of the chapter and work through some of the higher level changes here. At any point, please stop me. We do have follow-up questions to some of these. So if there are points, we have specifically structured some of these recommendations with some questions. But overall, globally, I won't repeat this for everyone, but we updated terminology as we did in the previous draft. So what that included is we looked at getting rid of acronyms, spelling out the full names of your review authorities, of your permits, really trying to make it as clear language as possible. Internal consistency when we're talking about various roles, departments, plans. We want to make sure at least everything is internally consistent from a language perspective. Getting into the real substantive change right off the bat is we updated all of the purpose statements and for all of your zoning districts. And our guide for that was your comprehensive plan. And that has really been the guiding document, the push for this update was we want to implement our comprehensive plan. We went through this exhaustive effort. We want to now have zoning code regulations that can really let that urban fabric play out. So we looked at the purpose statements in your comprehensive plan for each of your designations. We paired that up with the zone, and we made sure that it was consistent. You can kind of see some of the modifications that we've made here. So we're getting really into, in these purpose statements, we're getting into the envisioned density and intensity. We want to provide a high-level overview of the types of land uses that are generally allowed. And then something new that we've done is we want to tie it directly then back to your comprehensive plan. So we've put in references so that it makes it easy for you. If you're looking at guidance language potentially in your comprehensive plan, you can say, well, this zone implements directly the R3. So you'll see that for every zone, every zoning district in this draft. What we also did is we added a new section, kind of called it out more. It's called a zoning verification process or a zoning verification letter. This is a request that someone can make for information on their property. It was kind of buried in the in this section, but I thought it would be a useful tool that should be front-loaded, that people can know that they can submit requests to the city for property information, and we've tied that back to a zoning verification fee, which we actually presented last time we were here. So we'll see that as an addition. Additionally, we went through and analyzed all of the allowed land uses. primary permitted land uses within the tables. And we added some new ones. Again, any new ones that was called out, our direction from any new land uses would be state compliance, comprehensive plan, consistency, and then stakeholder and city feedback. So some of those new land uses that we've called out, we've introduced vocational and trade schools. We've called that out as a specific standalone use. We've added some additional land uses, or at least called them out and specified them, some retail-oriented one, mobile food vendors, mobile food trucks, standalone pharmacies as opposed to those being potentially accessory. We've also then evaluated industrial land uses and service commercial types of land uses. This is feedback from what your city staff is hearing as potential projects that may want to move in here. There is a desire for distribution facilities and trying to create a better way to regulate those. We've come up with the concept of regulating them by size, and then from there you could apply different permit requirements, as you'll see in the draft. In addition to looking at any new land uses that we would want to add, we also analyzed all of the entitlements and permit requirements. So whether this is an allowed by right, whether the land use is permitted with conformance with standards, or whether it's conditionally permitted, just to make sure that, again, we're aligning with the comprehensive plan, we're not being too onerous. It allows us that quality control check. We're going through the effort anyways. And we have made some recommendations. So here's just a kind of a snapshot of what the table looks like in the draft before you tonight. But we have changed some things for consistency. In some uses, we've are recommending it. We've changed from was permitted with compliance with standards, and now we've made that conditional. So you'll see a multitude of examples throughout this table. Other changes that you'll see that were, Brent kind of spoke to, is the typology for residential. So as you are aware, there is a standard that exists for minimum square footage for new construction, single family, two family, and multifamily. In taking that stakeholder feedback, we have made some recommendations on potentially reducing the minimum square footage for single-story, single-family homes only. So and as we'll get into, all of the other standards, based on stakeholder feedback, we recommended that we're analyzing at this point, stay the same. But there seems to be an opportunity to reduce that, and something that we're gonna be following up at the Planning Commission here shortly.
And what is that number? What are those numbers, current and future?
Yes, so for a single-family, single-story home, it's 1,700 square feet.
1,500.
1,500 square feet.
For a ranch.
For a two-story, single-family home, it's 1,500 square feet.
1,700 for a two-story.
The single level and multi-level are different square footages.
Yeah, 1,700. So 1,500 for a ranch.
Which is a single level. Anything that's multi-level, so two floors and up, is 1,700. The two-family, three-family is 1,000, and then the multi-family, I believe, is 500 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the current?
Those are your current, and what's proposed out of this is to reduce the ranch style down to 1,000.
I see it, yeah.
Instead of 17.
That's a bit of a concern.
Oh, you said the ranch, the
Is
two-story.
there a market for that?
There is. So smaller,
Ooh.
smaller, so
Young
the problem.
people who can't afford it.
So the problem is it's the buying market of introductory buyers can't afford the homes. And what we're hearing from the development community is that the smaller homes as a starter home, or even as an age-in-place retirement version to downsize, to get the smaller home drives the cost lower, which is meeting a price point. And right now, that price point isn't available, at least here in this market.
Yeah.
Regionally, there are communities surrounding that also have square footage requirements, but they're also lowering them to get the different types of housing typologies in. And it's just a minimum, so it doesn't mean that somebody can't come in and have 1,700 square foot or larger. It just opens the door that if the demand is there for a smaller house, it's available at the developer's disposal. They would still have to abide by the design standards for residential. And as we'll talk about later, and I'll just kind of touch on it here since you brought it up, if there's the concern of smaller units, you can actually enhance the design standards for those smaller units and offset it. So if there's the concern that the smaller unit might not be as applicable, you can have more prescriptive or stricter design standards for those smaller units. So there's ways to play around with it. Again, these are all just in a draft proposal form, and we're here just to take feedback. It may be through a discussion with the commission that, no, we don't wanna reduce that. That's fine. We just wanna bring something to you to react to and be responsive of what we're hearing as part of the process.
So then, with that, we also modified or clarified the applicability of the procedures on how you would review single-family attached products, and then the fees that you would go about applying to theirs. There seemed to be some ambiguity from the applicant perspective. So with coordination with staff, we've clarified that in the definitions, and we'll be adding additional language in the fee section that we brought to you last time we were here. And then additionally, we've proposed and we've offered some modifications to the definitions of how we're looking at and treating residential land uses. And so for consideration, what we've kind of built in is we've kind of gone away, at least from this initial proposal, we've gone away from the attached, detached being the marker for the product. And instead, we're offering for consideration, looking at actually, instead, how many units are on the site, whether those are attached or detached, and that being really the marker for the land use. So what we've done in here is we've offered some modifications to the various dwellings. And so as it stands in the draft, you would still retain the dwelling single family. That would be a single unit on a single parcel of property of land. Anything over one is kind of automatically considered like multifamily from a fee perspective. But within there, we've created these distinctions. So we have these 2, 3, and then anything, and 4, anything over that would be considered multifamily high. And we break that up because it allows us to put different permit requirements and different standards depending on the type of unit. Within there, we can still retain attached and detached design standards if that's something that we still want to retain. But at least from a description standpoint, we're really relying on how many units are existing on the lot as opposed to the typology of how they're actually formed together. And instead, we would rely on the standards to inform us of things. So just a little bit of a different change. So with that, we do have a series of questions specifically on this chapter that we would like to go through with the commission. This is intended to be some open dialogue. We're going to be taking notes, so yeah, feel free to fire away. But we'll start with a question that was posed, and it talks about separation standards, specifically for your liquor-oriented establishments, your bars, taverns, and nightclubs. Right now, there exists a separation standard. There's from setback from residentially zoned areas, 35 feet. And one of the first questions that we wanted to ask you tonight is the commission is, do we think that that separation standard is reasonable, is adequate, or should we potentially look at modifying that, whether it's reducing or increasing for compatibility issues? And Steph, I'm not sure if you have any recent examples where this has come up that you could share with the commission.
Yeah, there's a recent example. There is a property on South Dixie Highway that is next to existing bars. It's currently vacant. It's always been a commercial building, but the addition of an additional bar, tavern, or nightclub there is a bit concerning. So actually, when I was looking at these setbacks last week, I thought they were rather low in terms of distance from any sort of residentially zoned area. And I would also change that to any residentially used parcel rather than, because if there's not,
As somebody who has gone to nightclubs and bars and taverns and, you know, stayed out pretty late, for me, when I see this, I think that and I'm not sure how to split it apart, but I feel like bars and taverns and nightclubs, that could probably
Separate.
be separated and kind of split some of the issue. Because like, I'm thinking like, most bars in Middletown, most of the taverns, they're not blasting like club music until 2 in the morning. It's mostly like a kind of low-key kind of establishment. And nightclubs are gonna be more for like going out and actually like partying. So I feel like it might be worth looking into a way to kind of separate these out, but I have no idea how to phrase that without it becoming super restrictive. Does that make sense?
So follow-up question, generally, how does the city regulate, oh my gosh, amplified noise? Do you have an
That is
amplified?
through police.
Okay. Wonder if, I think that is a trigger that we've used in other cases, if it requires an amplified, if you have amplified noise, it kind of kicks that up. And thinking a nightclub would by default maybe have amplified noise, so that
Yeah.
might be something
Yeah.
we would look into.
Because it's like, I don't want to kind of handcuff any bars or taverns that are already there from not being able to have like a benefit concert, or even just like start like put up a stage, right, you know? So like, I don't want it to be limiting, but I feel like there's a way to kind of tease that out. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I guess, which will bring up, so downtown, we have mixed-use spaces, and we have quite a few tavern bars, on that strip. How would that affect it when we're trying to attract? Since I'm hearing, oh,
Yeah.
his
Well,
generation.
not yeah, that's, you know what
I mean, I have kids rate, so yeah,
Mm.
like that's my only issue.
I'm trending towards the upper age limit on that,
Oh,
so.
okay. So I don't know if that's, I guess my thing is, right now, you said there was one at Dixie. You said that, and I thought about, I can think of two. And I do feel the concern because one of them is actually in front of a behavioral mental health establishment that also caters to children. I have never been there, so I don't wanna, but I look at that and I'm like, well, some bars and establishments lets people come in there in the middle of the day, so.
I think it's more
What's
of the
the
concern
noise?
of like a nightclub
So that's
situation,
what- yeah.
rather than, and I think that's an excellent point of breaking out the two different
The
uses
difference, so
and
that might be,
standards.
But I think you're bringing up another actually interesting perspective, is that you're talking about the conflicting uses there, and should there be a separation requirement in general, not just a setback for noise, but it's not uncommon to have codes that have bars or taverns or nightclubs or liquor operating businesses be a specific distance away from other sensitive uses. So when
Yes.
you get into like daycares, childcare, churches, I mean, there are other ways you can start to separate them. And I don't know if I'm causing heartburn right now.
You did, because I just thought about it, and three of them are literally, they are next to those exact. So we are at a like, unfortunately,
Yeah.
our city is unique because mixed use is really mixed use in our city, and a lot of this area. So I don't even know.
Well, and I've seen it where when you have mixed use, you can carve out a mixed use zone,
Okay.
because the intent of mixed use is to have all of those together
Mhm.
in either the same parcel, the same building, side by side. And at least in mixed use zones that I've crafted, and Michael as well, is there's been carve outs so that this wouldn't apply. This would mainly apply to your single family neighborhoods,
okay.
where you would have, let's say, a commercial thoroughfare, residential is on the back end or bookends that, where you had incompatibility from that point. But for mixed use, you would typically have different performance standards for mixed use that would allow these uses to coexist, but under certain operational standards.
Okay. No, I agree. Is there a provision where we can have it for anything coming in to follow?
New
choose one,
uses.
Or
For
new uses,
new?
like new uses?
Mhm.
Cause I think that would, I mean, at this point, we don't have a lot of money, but yeah, I think that would be.
Yeah, I mean, so if a use is already existing and this code comes into play, that use would just be a legal non-conforming use, it would continue.
Okay.
This wouldn't necessarily prohibit that. Now, looking at non-conforming standards, if they started to change the business, expand the business, then it starts to get a little different. But this would apply to new development coming in.
Okay.
And I do wanna go down the road that you were going in your head, cause that's where my mind went, and which is kind of more strategically why I think we specified zone as opposed to use. Because if we tie it to a use, we could potentially have non-conforming structures and lots driving conforming development. So it is kind of a trade-off. If we stick it with the zone, then the development, we're kind of eliminating the potential for non-conforming use specifically. But again, open for feedback, this is just a draft.
Yeah.
So, for example, on item 1 there, looking at like our urban core, for example, I think that's probably one of the best pinnacles we have of true mixed use. The aspirations of upper floor residential, maybe in conjunction with a mixed use building that has a bar, tavern, nightclub below it. With it being set to the zoning standard, as long as it's kind of within the deepest portion of that urban core and you're not getting into an R4, R3 zoning, it's permissible. So.
I mean, you could even have a statement in the code that that there's an exception that it doesn't apply to specific zones. And which would encompass your downtown, and this wouldn't apply. So there are ways to carve out.
If we were to have it apply to your more traditional, single-family, low-intensity residential zones, do we feel like the 35-foot setback is still adequate if we were to keep things as they were?
If we're only tying this to the lowest density, am I hearing that right, the lowest density residential? Theoretically, then I think you might be able to like expand that, because like, I mean, 35 feet, what's the minimum lot width for R4 or R3? Or what, is it R1 that's the least dense?
Yes.
Okay, for R1, R2, maybe tie it to the larger of those two, so it's like.
A parcel away.
Yes, a
A
parcel away,
theoretical
theoretically,
parcel
for those least dense, portions, but like, if you're in a more dense portion of town, that you want that density there for a reason, you want those different uses within like a good walkable distance, so, I don't know, I think that, sorry, what was your name? Brent?
Yeah.
I think, what you were talking about, like carving it out for the different zoning districts would be a good way to go. I just don't know which ones to be like yes, no, yes, no. There's like the urban core that it should be in, maybe some of the lower density or the higher density residential. I'm trying to think of the new names, business and or the community and neighborhood business districts. But yeah, just something to think about.
Well, this wouldn't apply to the urban core, would it? I mean, you got residential on the second, third floor.
I think that's what we're
And
talking
bars
about,
on
is
the
like a
first floor.
carve out
Right.
for where this doesn't apply
Right.
that.
And right now it's it's just a blanket statement from residentially zoned or residential uses. And I think what we would need to do, part of this discussion, is we would need to have a carve out so it doesn't affect true mixed use areas, because otherwise they're no longer mixed use, because you're basically saying, oh, but no, it's
Right.
not compatible, and you can go down a rabbit hole beyond this use. You can find lots of uses that then are compatible and mixed use would work. So yes, we would have a carve out is what we're kind of talking about right now. So I think as part of this, what we can do is work with, from what we're hearing, work with your city staff to modify this setback, but make it clear where this would apply from the zoning district perspective. The more dense, purposeful, mixed-use areas of the city, we would carve out. It may require some additional performance standards, so when you do have those uses, you have your apartment above the bar. There are operational standards, which is pretty normal, so that it's not blasting music till 4 AM and you're trying to sleep. But we can provide some options, and we can work with city staff. This will all come back to the planning commission in a full package later in the spring, and we basically will re-review it all over again. But I do think that what people are bringing up makes sense. I actually wanna, are there any other, I know we're just honing in on this one use, but are there any other uses that are sensitive like this that you think should have a separation requirement from residential?
Well, we keep having, I'm wondering about these car dealerships. What was on this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so much I can say about that, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean, and I'd like to
Yeah.
hear what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, personally, I think residences and cars, like car dealerships, I should say, are completely incompatible. And like, you know, me, I'm the walkable density guy. So my opinion on cars may not be the shining standard. But like, yeah, I've just noticed that there's a lot more car dealerships near neighborhoods than when I was a kid. I just can't help but feel that has some sort of impact on traffic safety and overall, like, accessibility for pedestrians. I can't think of anywhere specific right now, but like, yes, that's one of those things that keeps on popping up for both the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission are these car dealerships. But.
And what is the primary issue with the compatibility? Is it the traffic, is it noise, is it, what are you
I would
hearing
say,
in your
like,
position, or what
the-
is city
Kind
staff
of
hearing?
all of the
The
above.
outdoor storage
I said
component.
it
To
is
me,
the
that's
visual
what
aspect.
really,
Okay.
And what, yeah.
what really confuses me in terms of, you know, when you have a neighborhood commercial grocery store, you know, you can walk there, you go into the store, and then when you start having outdoor storage as part of your business, it really, to me, it's a heavier commercial use, and
If it's in a-
yeah.
If it's in a
Right, but
residential
we're not-
neighborhood, it's the same as parking your car on your.
But we're not talking like the
on your
cars that are out
yard.
for sale as the storage, we're talking like the accessory storage of other components that are part of that business.
I think it's kind of mixed, because I have learned also a couple things that come to our, planning commission, that actually that is it. That they have learned that there's an empty car lots, and they found a way to store their whatever on that form, but they say it's a car dealership with no
Okay.
license. And I drive past a lot of things, and I found more and more where, is that the, do they have license? And looking and seeing, like, those cars aren't moving. Those cars are not for sale, and so having some type of regulation and just being clear, because if I don't live there and I'm seeing it, how do the people who live there, how is that affected now? What is it, not just, you know, being traffic, but visibility to being, what does that bring to the homeowners, you know, thing, how they're trying to sell their home and boom, you got 3 car dealerships in your little, you know, small area, so, you know.
Anecdotally, I think the issues seem to rise the smaller the dealership. You know,
Okay.
when dealer, you know, a more conventional dealership, 5+ acres, there seems to be a sense of quality control. You're already in a more heavier commercial area because they have to have the land. When you're getting someone trying to come onto a dealership on half an acre, now you're really now you're creating density of that outdoor storage. There's other components that could be
You're
adverse.
cramming as many cars as
Yeah,
possible.
cause they no
Exactly.
longer have the, like, we have that thing where the noise can't be from 8P to 8,
Yep.
and I'm like, that's not even an issue anymore. Like, I even rather have that, cause I'm an 80s kid, and I remember the loudspeaker, I'm like, that's the least of the worry. How about the motor that, because.
Yeah,
I'm
and you know,
sorry.
like, kind of jumping on what Jacob said, it's kind of like, if there is an empty lot in town, somebody like is going to try and find a way to just like store cars there if they can get their hands on the land, because like, it's just like, it's way cheaper than actually redeveloping or reinvesting the plot than to just like kind of put, you know, like a small shack on there or use the existing structure and then just boom, car dealership. So it's like the fast and cheap way to, does that make sense? I feel like that's the through line between all of these like car dealerships that have been coming before us, is like, this is a location where we can just squeeze it, you know, for that cash.
Okay. City staff, any other uses that you think could, you know, through your review of applications and questions you get, are there any other uses that could also benefit from a similar standard or the same standard. It could be expanded beyond just that use.
I would like to discuss, if we're regulating one type of more nightlife or something, I would like to have a discussion, and I don't see them going out of business anytime soon, but dispensaries, I would like to discuss if there's the opportunity to add any standards, use-specific standards or performance standards, with our dispensaries, because currently they're permitted outright. And I just think if we're regulating maybe bars, taverns, and nightclubs, there is the opportunity to do on the other hand, now it's legal in Ohio, dispensaries. And this is a recent text amendment, so this would almost be adding to what's already been approved.
I thought city council stated that maximum number they were gonna allow.
There is a maximum of 3 permitted in the city, and this goes back to, again, I don't think the 1.5, we have the one operating off of, by the town hall. There's a second one that's nearing completion by Verity. We have
Just on the road.
a third one that's currently, well, we've had interest, nothing's come of fruition yet, as of yet, but just the consideration of long-term use here, should any of those go out of business, or should that third one not come into existence prior to the development code being updated, is there consideration for setbacks from residentially zoned areas?
I mean, the amendment that was voted on by the Ohio citizens was pretty much regulate marijuana like alcohol. So are there any standards from, like liquor stores that we could look at and apply to that? If we're keeping the spirit of the law, but.
It was setbacks from schools and churches for, I think, liquor stores, certainly bars.
And in the drafting through the current marijuana, both adult use cannabis and medical, that is before the development code. It's already in the development code, I should say, but part of that was through the reflection of what those standards are for the schools. They're I think 500-foot setbacks from schools, churches, parks, anything else that would justify as like a educational institution, which we do have reflective there on probably economic development. I don't think it's on the zoning map, but
We just don't have them in our zoning regulations. So whatever the state of Ohio has set forth has not been incorporated into.
Maybe they shouldn't be allowed within 500 foot of a Taco Bell.
I don't know, I think they go hand in hand. I mean,
that would have zoned both out.
Yeah.
The interesting overlay, not to sidebar too far, but with the current ORC 500-foot setbacks, it did significantly reduce the accessibility of dispensaries across the state, or I'm sorry, across the city. And then with the 1 mile radius for the 2 that are coming online, I think there's really only about maybe 3 parcels left across the city, or small tracts that could be a potential for a third. So things to keep in mind as we work through that in terms of how things like ORC regulations overlaying with zoning and what the application is.
so would you say that the ORC regulations right now pretty much create the boundary and barriers, and that the development code doesn't necessarily need to touch on it because it's already?
I mean, there's a saturation. Could it be copied just to have it codified locally? I
Just
think
so
that's
it's all
the
right
planning
there,
commission.
you don't have to reference other documents. I think that's worth looking into, how it's regulated by the ORC, and then also just doing a simple comparison with any applicable standards for like liquor stores, or, whatever else you can group under that use. I don't have anything specific, because there really is like, 1.5, not even really in Middletown, at the moment. So like, I don't have any particular gripes, because none have come around, but if we're being proactive.
So potentially incorporate the ORC standards, or just refer out?
I mean,
there's different viewpoints on it. Sometimes referring out is good. If the law changes, then you're not
Yeah,
these-
that makes
These two
sense.
will have to
Yeah.
go back and change it. We can always put the section
Mhm.
in the ORC that you can go search it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, if you feel it's more beneficial to have the standards listed, we can do that. Is there a preference that planning commission thinks works better?
Or the hybrid of doing both.
Yeah,
where we
I mean,
are
good.
codifying
It's
existing-
as simple as like just adding some verbiage that just like we can codify the standard, and then like this is codified like in reference to like this ORC provision, and it's subject to change, like it
Sure.
should just reflect whatever the state law on it is. I don't know how to
Yeah,
phrase that.
you can always have language which gives a nod to the fact that that if there is a discrepancy between that and the law, which one kind of
Mhm.
trumps the other,
Mhm.
and refer, yeah, we can come up with some language. And then legal will review all of these
Yeah, of
anyways and
course,
make sure
of
it's
course.
kosher.
Yeah.
So.
I can't think of really anything else at this
Okay.
immediate moment.
Well, and that wasn't originally part of the question, but
Mhm.
we started to get into some other uses, and I'm like,
Yeah.
we might have hit on something, so
Mhm.
we should try to, at least try to talk some of this through, but some good ideas, and we can work, with the planning team on incorporating some of these.
Food trucks.
Would group homes kind of come into this a little bit, or
I think
It's-
there's a
that's
whole
a big-
section
that's
that's
a
on
big
this,
smile.
yeah.
It's an interesting one. I think some of my to-do work, and maybe if you guys have any notable studies that point to a separation between a group home and a group home, a group home and a transitional home,
Mhm.
cause we have our current separation for transitional homes from other transitional homes as well as group homes, but, there's some legal,
Terminology.
yeah, we gotta be
Identifications.
careful in
I have
terms of.
Yeah, certainly being able to brave any scrutiny considerations, litigation in regards to ADA or any other sort of state or federal, rules surrounding them. But certainly, in the last 6 months, it's something, city staff's really taking a deep dive. It's again, getting into those layers of, all right, trying to be legal adverse. How do we make sure that whatever we do at a local level complies with state or federal standards?
Isn't there a whole section on support homes, like that's the, like, kind of grouping some of these together for, yeah, I would just read through the document before I came,
Yeah.
so, give it a look.
The supportive housing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was a question that we were looking at internally. I don't think we've brought it before the planning commission. We wanted to kind of talk about it as a team, but that was a question that we had. In the draft, we have it as 1,000.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What I don't think you saw in that was my comment.
Yeah, there were some that I couldn't open to
Yeah.
see, so.
And so maybe I'll just read what I wrote. So I said, a few thoughts for consideration here. A big part of the justification is that separation requirements aimed at supportive or transitional housing are frequently challenged under the Federal Fair Housing Act. HUD and the DOJ have specifically flagged spacing requirements for residential land uses as a practice that can potentially lead to discriminatory application of standards, and could lead to detrimental effects. I think right now, the separation was 1,500. So in our draft, we modified reducing that to 1,000 feet, at least as a step to approaching a least restrictive approach. But it would still be up to consideration if those separation standards would still wanna apply to group homes or supportive housing. That was at least some of the initial conversations we were having.
is our definition of group homes, and
So, and I think.
is that good enough? Because I think that's come up in some of our meetings as to what is a group home.
I don't think that's it. I think that the people who are applying for said group home, or they're trying to say it's not a group home and
Right.
have it defined as something
Right.
else. And they're trying to act as though it's just a rental, single family or multi-family rental with group home criteria that they're hitting under. So I think it's a whole separate issue in a sorts. So I think that the 1,000 feet is fine. It's just that, unfortunately, I think that goes into the zoning, so we're just making sure people who come to our community understands what we allow, and them going about the proper channels of having it licensed and operating appropriately versus the feet in square footage. I
Would it be
think that's
possible to
more-
say, if there are multiple families or multiple people in a home, it's only a group home if it has a service that's being provided that has to be licensed? And if it doesn't, then it's multifamily?
Group homes
No.
and transitional homes are two very different uses. Group homes are when you're licensed by, I think it's 3 different state of Ohio agencies, either the developmental disabilities, mental health and addiction services, and children and youth, I think is the third one. So that's group homes in a nutshell. But then transitional homes, I think, yes, I think our definition currently is not, I don't remember if you guys did look at our definition for that yet.
For group home is,
Well, we did.
so transitional.
Supportive housing.
Supportive
There it
housing,
is.
yes.
That's it.
So.
That's what we keep having
the
come up. It's
Supportive housing, yeah, a lot of people like to say, well, I don't meet that definition, and when it comes down to it, they do, but, I think with the updated terminology, it may help guide maybe the public hearings a bit better in terms of, actually you do, and here's why, but it takes more on, I guess, staff and planning commission to be like interjecting and you may not feel that you meet this definition, but this is what staff has determined your use to be. If you would like to appeal that determination, you can go to Board of Zoning Appeals, and go forth and prosper. on
Cause
their
that's our
decision.
issue, I mean, our issue, cause I'm in housing, but the thing is, and why it's separate, if you are renting rooms for rent, that is separate from 6 people doing one lease. And they're doing the rooms for rent, which is attached to certain zoning and regulations. I know in the city of Hamilton, they do, if it's more than 6 people, I don't know if it's so clear, cause I try not to pay attention to Middletown, but it's people just trying to come and change it, so really, it's more so of, we just do the law, like explain to them, because a lot of people, I think there was a group that came, and they looked at the state of Ohio requirements, and they never not once looked at our city. And I say that because when I found out what was happening, I went to them and I said, you probably wanna go to the planning and the zoning board and see what licensing stuff you need with our city. And they came back to the meeting and was like, it says that we don't have to do X, Y, and Z for state of Ohio. And I think that's the problem, people not understanding our city has restrictions, and that's what we were concerned about in that meeting, because if you're not licensed or eligible to have that, we have to say no. And I think that's the biggest thing, understanding that, because I think that's how we voted. This is what you actually have based on what the data and information says. It's not conflicting, regardless of what the state of Ohio says. Yes, we respect that, but we haven't even got that far. You have to start local and then go up. Does that make sense?
It does, this is just not my field of expertise. I just see like all of these different kind of types
Yes.
that are under this umbrella, and that's what makes
And
it
it's coming up.
confusing. So, like, and there's all of these like little things that differentiate each one, because they all kind of like, they all have a similar overall kind of purpose, so like, it's about how it's structured, right, really, that's, like internally, that is like a huge determining
I
factor,
think the
and
biggest
that's,
thing
right?
is if services are provided or not. I think that's the biggest difference,
Mhm.
and some of the ones that come across.
Mhm.
Because I think when services are provided, or you have someone actually living there full-time, that changes it, and that's when it goes to the group home or transitional housing comes into play.
Mhm.
But if you just have people renting rooms and staying there, and I don't know if we wanna change that, because I know, because of how unaffordable housing is right now, we do have people needing, having to go and share housing or rent out their unit, I don't know if that's something that, to me, that would be the only thing that I would have concern about. What is our policy, our guidelines, as far as renting rooms when you're needing to make that extra income? Cause I see a lot of areas are not zoned for it.
Not zoned for renting rooms, is that something that's prohibited?
So
Yeah.
rooming houses
Boarding
are.
house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're only permitted in,
Mhm.
or conditionally permitted, I believe, in our urban core districts, so to
Mhm.
the central and support,
Yeah.
some districts.
Interesting, that's something something worth taking a gander at for sure. Middletown has a lot of people that are housing insecure, so a wider array of affordable housing options, especially with a town that has so much single-family homes, and a lot of them are owned by people who are now empty nesters or like aging out, you know, and they need to transition. So I don't know, keeping options open for residents to have flexibility, I think is a good thing, but I don't know any specifics.
I would say it's more on the property owner.
Mhm.
And I think there's definitely a delicate balance as
It is.
we try to drive homeownership up and rentals down.
Yeah.
So I think there might.
Wouldn't that
There is
be
a-
kind of
Because when I
both?
said, I'm like, well, I don't want the money, right, but.
Yeah. Mhm.
Just-
And, you know, I don't want every single family house to be rented out completely for the rooms, you know? But I think that it's something that might be worth
But it
exploring,
does.
you know?
As a house, someone who
Mhm.
puts people in
'Cause
housing.
it's only permitted in urban core.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that could probably, you know, maybe in some of the more dense neighborhoods, that could be permitted as well, or, I don't know.
Well, and I think when we talk about the residential zones and we talk about the development standards, and we already kind of spoke on the square footage requirements, without getting in,
Mhm.
without opening the door to an increased renter environment, that
Mhm.
would open the door to increased buyer environment if there are more types of housing
Mhm.
available for purchase at different price points.
Mhm.
I think part of the issue is right now, there is a specific type of house and size and price point that is just too high on the threshold that
Mhm.
is not being able to hit. And so that's where you're getting the rental market coming in, because they
Mhm.
can afford the rent but can't afford the down and then the mortgage.
Yeah.
When you start to have different types of housing come in that can meet those price points, that'll start to expand
Mhm.
the different options. But we'll get to that point. I do want to jump to this second question. The city previously attempted to implement some zoning regulations pertaining to like mobile food truck, call them parks or plazas. It's where you have all the trucks parked and you can go sit outside on a summer night and get your tacos and whatever you want. Now, this did not make it forward. It did not proceed. So this doesn't exist.
Mhm.
But we were having the conversation internally if we should bring this use back up, and we wanted to float it by the planning commission. Is this a use, first of all, that should be considered? Is it something that potentially could work in Middletown? And if so, what type of development standards would be appropriate for a use like that? I mean, we have our own professional judgment, but I'd like to hear from the planning commission's perspective.
I know existing restaurants objected to that when it was originally put in.
Competition.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially if they're gonna park right in front of their place.
I mean, they.
So, like, coming from me, I'm viewing this as like, how can we let people start businesses within the economic means that people have in this town, right? So there's a lower startup cost for food trucks, than there is for, you know,
The
in
brick and mortar.
building kind of business. And, you know, you can use it as a launch pad. There are people that have done that. So that's where I'm coming, the angle I'm coming from at it. Actually, one of the reasons why I applied to even be on this board is because can't remember what it's named, but the one that's by Wendy's on Briel, that food truck
Turkeys.
plaza
Oh,
that's there.
Turkeys R Us.
Yeah, the Turkeys R Us. Love that guy. I've been going there for a long time, and there are all these difficulties with him, like getting electric because of the zoning and, you know, all these site-specific standards that really hindered the development of that as a property, as a space, and it made it so that it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where like there weren't enough resources or provisions to support it, so it suffered and it's been failing.
Mhm.
So does that make sense? So.
Oh, you're right, and he is everywhere else, and and I mean other states and cities, and he makes lots of money. So he's traveling, so we're losing that, because that's money for our city and people in our city, because if it's good, they're gonna come. And I think Middletown loses on that, so, I mean, if we had certain places where they can't be, it's fine, but I'm just gonna be honest, if your food is good, they're gonna come regardless, like,
Exactly.
Middletown, McDonald's is crappy, but people love it. and it's gonna still be here after we're all gone. So I think that definitely we need to have, revisit, well, have something with that.
Did you have some thoughts on this topic?
No, I mean, I have no problem with the trucks, but I do remember it was a big issue a few years ago.
I would think,
And I would think the big issue would be where they could park.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying about how, like, about the used car lots, right? There's an empty parking lot, best use that somebody can think of is to put a bunch of cars there and sell them. Similar concept with the food trucks, however, this is a social space, this is a space where people can exchange, in conversation and try out new foods and like hang out with their friends, especially if they get the resources to really invest in the space, right? Versus you're not doing any of that in used, car lots. So I think that's an important distinction, even though on the surface it might it's about the social relationships that builds between the people that frequent it, the people that own and operate it, and the people that own and operate like the trucks,
And I think part of this is this would be a primary use.
Mhm.
So it would be a site.
They would be.
Where the trucks they're designated to park, the electrical hookups are there. That it wouldn't be, it's not like your
It
food
wouldn't
truck
be a
parking
big-
on one street and then moves the next day. This would be like a designated location. So
like a plaza.
So I
Correct,
get it.
correct.
'Cause
So
I want- yeah.
there's two different ways to approach mobile food trucks. There's one that's truly mobile and it moves, we've written standards for communities where the truck has to move every 3 hours. And it has to be in certain areas and it has to have hookups and stuff
No,
like that.
I'm not, I don't even like
And-
it every weekend change it. I think
Mhm.
to make it more.
But I think what we're visualizing is like a
Maybe
space,
conditional use?
is a space, what you could do as a conditional use, because you would apply conditions to it, but a space where trucks would basically park, and that's where they would be. And if you wanted to get food from a food truck, you would go to this location, it would have outdoor seating.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's-
Which seems like
I
a few
would
years
love-
ago, that was proposed for downtown.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the, I don't know if it's push or point of, I guess, taking a look at this again, it was about 18 to 24 months ago. We looked for development to write this in the development code, it did not move forward. To your point, it was about 3-ish years ago, I think there was an excessive amount of events, we did get pushback from the downtown community. From the economic development front, Mr. Mentel, you're spot on with, food trucks are very much the launch pad for small businesses, right? It's that first investment, it's the first ability to kind of take shape. But then when you really start to look at I guess the permanency of them, it almost creates a disadvantage to the brick and mortars, right?
Mhm.
The folks that have actually went in, whether it's a franchisee or somebody who's gone in to put the sweat equity into a brick and mortar location, that had to go through building code. Mobile food trucks don't have, or they're able to kind of circumvent a lot of those health department regulations. It's not frequently known, but for example, the food trucks, some of the food trucks that are based in Middletown, if they did not originate out of Middletown, they are not inspected by the Middletown Health Department. They are inspected by the point of origin. There's several food trucks in the city limits that, because their point of origin is Hamilton County, the Hamilton County Health Department is who is supposed to be the licensee and the inspector of that. If that food truck is built in Hamilton County, they got their inspection in 2021, and they haven't left a location in Middletown in 5 years, the Hamilton County Board of Health has not came up to inspect them, and we have no jurisdiction to go in there and do any sort of requirements. So those are kind of those trade-offs, right?
There's nothing we can do to change that jurisdiction or work out agreements with the
Well, that's,
counties? Or-
that gets into how, because it's a trailer, it's really a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think this is where some of that nuance comes into, it's almost like the use of a vehicle and how it reflects on the zoning and the location it's allowed in. Certainly for things like festivals, events, the day-to-day operations, by all means, for food trucks to kind of come in there to help amplify activities that we have in the city, I think more the merrier. Ohio Challenge is a great example. Having that row of food trucks there at Smith Park, kind of helping amplify what's going on there. The catch-22 to the conversation we had about car auto sales, sometimes this is looked at as a way to kind of not flip smaller properties, but at a cost comparison.
I think what, going off of what Jacob was saying, is how do we drive investment to these properties rather than just everybody gets to park their food truck on it and then it's just an empty piece of asphalt with food
Yeah.
trucks on it?
And then plus that's wear and tear on the property that they don't have to pay for, who's coming there to do it. Also, I wanna protect this strip behind us, because that will hurt the businesses that are trying to stay thrive if we allow, I mean, I definitely wanna allow it, but I don't know where we will.
Yeah, it's a real tricky one.
Oh, I mean, I wanna put limitations on where it could be, like, I hate to throw it out the east end, but in other places, but just, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's, and I think if there's the openness to exploring this, we can work with city staff based on what we're hearing from the commission about, you know, not wanting to upend established businesses that are trying to, you know, keep the doors open and maintain, you know, customer base. We could look into other locations of where something like this can't work. But before we went too far down this path, we at least wanna take the temperature to see if that's something to even consider. We don't wanna put the effort in if the planning commission's like, I don't think this is something that is really a good idea.
Because we do have the ability here to have development and site operational standards that we would apply like other land uses. So we could, for instance, we could require that there are restroom facilities, permanent restroom facilities.
It's true, yeah.
We could allow, like an accessory, if we, well, maybe a larger conversation, it doesn't have to be primary land use, but there is a potential, if we wanted to, that you could make an allowance for like a physical, maybe built structure on that property that might be, could also lend itself to the overall parking space or something.
So, two like concurrent thoughts. One, establish a cap on how many of the plazas are allowed in town. That way there's like a cap on how many to,
We
no?
can
That's what I said, I
No?
guess do what I was thinking.
Okay.
It's not permanent.
That is
So
showing
that's one.
prejudice to certain places, they would, even though we know what we're doing, it
Yeah.
would make it look like.
So that was just to address like the brick and mortar
Yeah.
thing. And then, sorry, the second concurrent thought went out of my head with the first one. I'll, if I remember it, I'll bring it back.
We were gonna
Go.
bring up something too.
Could a food truck plaza be looked at as an accessory use? Accessory to a principal use for private property?
You certainly could.
You could.
You could.
The second is,
Go ahead.
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
I remember looking at the supportive housing, bit earlier, and there was like a comment that was like, talking about having a named responsible organization for the home. Same could be said for a food truck plaza, where like if somebody is operating a food truck plaza on a spot, it needs to have like a named, accountable organization behind it of some sort, whether it be a business or cooperative, you know, maybe not nonprofit, but you know what I'm trying to say. That could be part of the site-specific standards, instead of just like, somebody owns it and then they rent out, you know, like, the spots, you know, on the week-by-week basis, they have to form some sort of actual organization structure behind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a lot of potential if you're going through, if you require a conditional use permit for this use, which I would recommend would be the appropriate entitlement for it, that you, through that process, I think you have the ability to work with the applicant to get and build in some of those conditions of approval, potentially. But I think to Brent's point, we wanted to see if this was something we should bring back again, being that there was an effort. I think there was standards that were drafted as well, or was it just brought in as a
use?
2 years ago, 18 months ago, it went before city council for adoption, and at that point it died on the floor legislatively. So there should be something, now that we have the archives back, that we could glean from. I don't know how much on the zoning end it was. I was not privy to that effort on the regulatory body. It may not have touched on the zoning as much as it touched on a different facet.
Our paralegal found that, I just need to forward it to you guys, so I'll do that.
Okay.
We have a lot more. No, this is great.
Well, there's a
This
reason
is-
why we started at,
this
earlier
is-
than last time.
Would,
Absolutely.
would anyone like a water by chance?
Yes, please. I asked my
We
dad.
do have,
Apparently
we got
she-
waters.
I've got
One
my,
second. I'm like, I'm waiting, I heard noise.
since we're taking a short break, I'm gonna run to the bathroom
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah, I'm so upset. I watched her car go, I'm like, I literally said, I know you haven't left yet, bring your water. You were upstairs. And then I see her car.
You're like, no.
Yeah, I did, I was like, make her come back. Oh, wow. I'll remember that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you were basically.
Thanks, Jake.
You were like 4:37.
We were both running, we were like 15 minutes, and both of us are like sweating, like, it's fine, it's fine.
I think we could.
There's a drive safe, we're like.
At least 7 last time, didn't
I
we?
wish I could stay.
Highway patrol.
No, we passed one.
You just go.
Oh my, no, we passed one, and
Yeah,
the brake goes,
that's
oh, that was a highway.
No, I got the
Oh,
change right here.
no.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
because
swear
I
he
had to
must have
say
been
I
looking
can't. I
down or
was like,
something.
I'm pretty
I
sure
swear.
I was
The
still
speed limit is
and then I
like-
never saw Rick.
That's where
For the
Christie
majority
went
of the way
to,
here, it's 55.
went to that.
Yeah, because then once you hit like.
Storage?
I
You
forget
should be seeing City Manager Combs as well as Michela from.
And then it goes up
our
to
department there.
65.
Yeah.
I
The
will
large portion of it, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go my normal.
No, I know that all of us is working real hard.
Oh my God, it's 55.
What's after this, the self-storage, anything?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot.
A lot of good stuff.
Oh.
Such as?
Is there any particular topic of interest that you were?
No, materials maybe,
Material?
for residential, or for,
That.
I don't think
Residential or
that wasn't
commercial?
in there.
No, that'll be a later study session.
yeah.
So that one will be, that study session will be in April. April will get into the design, the materials, the orientation. It'd also get into like parking and signage and.
Did you want water?
This is complicated stuff though, dealing with non.
You're right, Roger.
Yeah, so it.
I mean, it's not.
It's the discussion of, are
Two of them.
our
make
site
it-
development standards realistic even for today's current lots?
And-
Thus,
Anyone else?
any new developments going forward.
Water?
I mean.
Oh, there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You continue.
To be continued.
Do you want this back?
No, you can keep it.
I need some.
It is, if you go to
Old age too.
the hall, and there's like a hallway to the right. the first floor.
This is what you earn when you stay in a lot of Hampton Inn Suites. And then you get silver membership, they give you cookies.
See you, Joe.
Worth it.
I know, I was at a hotel like 2 weeks ago and they taped a gold star to my door. And I'm like, I was at the coworker, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I don't know, this is weird. I don't know if I like this, like, in the hall.
What was that, Bobby?
Oh, well, I don't wanna be called out like that, like.
Was that
why-
nothing?
Why does he have a gold star? I don't know. You know, so it's really sad is when you go to a hotel so many times you walk in, and they're like, hey, you're back.
I actually got a Christmas card for one.
Did you?
That's our local school day. I'm here for clothes.
It's terrible. Actually, that's how it is at the Cincinnati airport at the Enterprise counter. We walk up, it's you again. Hey.
Yeah.
Give me the keys, I gotta go.
Yeah.
She was like, you're missing the snow. I'm like, yeah, we are. Dang it.
No, I wanted to spend the whole weekend in Middletown.
No, we joked about that. I'm like, we would never make it out. We'd get stuck. Oh, goodness.
You can just, take the tunnels out.
Oh, God. Does everybody?
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
back.
Let's do it. So, let's talk about self-storage facilities. This was something through our review that we called out. This is discussing the height. So the maximum allowable height for a self-storage facility right now in the development code is 15 feet. Now, the reason why this caught our attention is because the base zoning districts have higher height limits than 15 feet. So the question we wanted to pose, at least here to the planning commission, is, one, is this height appropriate? Or would you have the use just comply with what the height is within the zoning district? So for example, if the zoning district has a 30-foot height, would this use be allowed to have a 30-foot height to reflect the development that you're seeing within it? And the bigger topic for discussion that came out of this, and we discussed this with city staff as well, is we're starting to see self-storage facilities go into more infill compact areas. The only way to get storage units is to go up. So a lot of the times you're seeing 2-3-story U-Haul facilities with the containers that, on second and third floors. This would outwardly prohibit it. At 15 feet, you're not gonna go with floor plates, you're not gonna get into a 2-story unit, or a 2-story self-storage facility. So, we just wanted to talk with the planning commission to see is this 15 feet something that we should maintain, or is this something that is just not feasible with the current way that the uses are heading from just a practical standpoint, and have that conversation?
I think it makes sense to just have it be the base zoning district height limit personally, especially because we're seeing that trend.
I agree.
I think there's one being built in like North Dayton right now, right at the southern intersection of 70 and 75, so.
Oh, really? Like a multi-level store? Oh, okay.
Wait,
Yeah,
is
so
one
there's
coming, or?
in,
Oh, it just, no, not here.
Okay.
There's one being built in North
yeah,
Dayton.
You said one being built in
North Dayton. There's
Yeah,
one.
because they have one in Vandalia, I think. It's, yeah, and then the one downtown in Dayton is, I guess, leveled. Because I was like, oh, is that a new thing? I just thought it was because some of these places don't have the space, so building up.
The view on Verity is at least 2 levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't
Yeah,
that
there is
the
a-
2-story?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, both U-Haul dealers on Verity had gone through expansions, late 2010s, early 2020s.
I mean, my issue is not, I mean, it is that, but it's also in the fact that having too many, that's more my concern. Like, I feel like they're popping up at an alarming rate, and they're being built on property that could have been used for something else.
That's a common concern, and it's
What
one
is our
that
issue?
we both feel personally, so I understand that completely. It's not a, what's the, for personal storage, what is the, I'm missing the word here and I'm drawing a complete blank, but it's not the best use of land from an economic perspective.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Opportunity
It's a
cost.
really,
it doesn't
it's a dead use.
create.
Yes,
Yeah.
that one. That-
Yes.
It's like warehousing.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not an employment,
True.
Mhm.
you could probably speak to
Yes,
this from economic.
from the economic development side, it's truly the, like, I guess, focal point, if you wanna point to a property that it's not a feasible use. Like, the city does not see an ROI on self-storage facilities.
Yeah.
You know, at a minimum for warehousing, even recreation downstream, obviously, there's community, like, impact that recreation space has. Self-storage, while it may help people's personal clutter, there's no job creation, there's no commercial vitality with that. The property tax, because 9 times out of 10, they are very simplistic construction, it's minimal. And it's difficult. I mean, I think the one thing I would give Middletown, in looking at where a lot of our self-storage is, very narrow lots, very
Yeah.
difficult to put stuff in. Just concerns, and obviously this more on the economic development front than the zoning front, but as you go vertical, the adaptive reuse of some properties that could have seen a higher and best use in other locations may also be of concern. So weighing out those pros and cons, maybe there's architectural features that could balance that, for things to consider.
Or enhanced
Yeah.
features.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Landscaping is one.
Yeah, Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying on that. For me, I'm just like, let's allow for the most, maximal use of the space as possible, prevent sprawl, but it also, like you just said, it makes it harder to adapt that use in the future. So, and I think that's definitely something worth considering, because I would really hate to see, like, just a spot in town be self-storage forever in perpetuity. So.
Well, what about, RVs and, boats and that sort of thing, storage for those? That seems to be very, very popular, and those seem to fill up pretty quickly.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I would put that in parallel with self-storage facilities.
Yeah.
Truck parking is another one, and I think are we gonna touch on truck parking later?
Yes.
We will.
Okay. Yeah, any of those passive uses from an economic impact perspective, things that the city does not collect direct income tax or very residual property tax, right? The city already collects maybe 5% of a property tax bill. For when you're looking at just straight parking, self-storage facilities, that's a very de minimis amount. Obviously economic impact's not the forego for every decision made on a development code update, but to give that insight.
Well, there should be some income tax from people that are renting it out.
For the RVs and boats and, I mean, if they'd be working in the city, the one interesting thing with sort of vehicular uses, and I can probably touch on it more on the truck parking, about 10 years ago, the state of Ohio had done what's commonly known as the nexus to nowhere for truck parking. So logistics companies, even if they could be based, say it's Line Star Logistics, Red Star Logistics, they could have 500 employees. The only employees we would collect W-2 withholding on are the ones that are based in the city limits that actually do not leave the facility. So any truck that goes, say that truck's driving from California and back, we do not collect the income tax on that person unless, I think it's like a 20-day working period that they have to actually work their day in and day out for 20 days consecutively for an income tax collection to be identified. So Ohio had done that, and that's why you see a lot of communities, even ourselves, be a little bit more adverse to truck parking because of that fact of it's a large strain on our logistic infrastructure and no return on investment. So it makes, to that point, it's difficult.
Yeah, this is definitely an odd one to consider, like where's the right balance to strike on that? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm anti-sprawl, so I think allowing for this would be the, the wisest move, but is it worth the economic permanence trade-off?
And maybe looking at what zoning districts it can go in,
Oh, true.
balances that out, right?
Yeah.
You can start to limit the zoning districts that it
It's true.
applies to. The other,
I read through that. 'Cause
Going
I'm
through this
okay with
process, I
this.
feel like I have a whole tool belt and I've been using like one or two tools. I'm like trying to figure out what the other ones do. Does that make sense?
Well,
So-
absolutely.
And there was something that that you had mentioned about, well, what about the boat and the RV parking? In my mind, I see that as different than typical self-storage. It's,
Yeah, we separate them.
It's
So-
an outdoor component.
Yeah, so I think that what, I have my radar went up and went, ooh, I wanna look back at this definition, cause I wanna make sure that that's almost not included in this. And that's separate, cause I think that the outdoor storage of vehicles, whether they're jet skis, boats, or RVs, is very different. It has circulation issues, screening issues that are different than like a U-Haul storage facility. So that's something that I'll probably wanna go back and double check. Yep, so thank you. Oh, here we get into the fun stuff.
There we go. So as mentioned, we have in this draft looked at proposing a reduction in the minimum square footage requirements for new construction. And really the only change that we have made, wanted to talk about with the commission, potential pros and cons here, is the reduction of the single family, single story, that ranch style typology, reducing that from what is currently a 1,700 square foot requirement, and lowering that to 1,000 square feet.
I think those square footages are flipped.
Yeah, cause I hope you don't let
It
a
look like it
single
should.
flare family do 17, but a two-story can do, that would be weird,
I think they're saying that this is the current.
but isn't
No,
it flipped?
It's flipped,
It's flipped.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So a ranch has to be at least 1,500
Mhm.
square feet, and then a two-story, single-family dwelling, it has to be at least 1,700 square feet.
Got it.
Yes.
Sorry.
So,
Mhm.
the yes, so 15 to 1,000. And the impetus on this was there, from the stakeholders that we spoke with, developers, those that are in real estate, from their perspective, there is a market for smaller, more affordable
Oh, yeah.
by design typologies for first-time home buyers, and that not affordable but attainable kind of style housing.
Okay.
And so,
Especially
when
with
we,
the open floor plan.
so when we dug into that and started getting into the specifics, the square footage, I mean, building materials came up as something, you know, the types of materials, but really what it came down to is the square footage. The developable space is really adding an additional cost. And so when we tried to that, we looked at, okay, what other single-family typologies out there? And 1,000 square feet, really, seemed like the minimum that you would want to go.
Yeah.
So that is where our starting point was. And not that every development that would come in would be at 1,000, but it creates an opportunity
The market's not there.
if the market's there, on a potential site, if it works, it would still have to comply with all of the other design standards, but is there an appetite to even reducing that minimum standard?
And I think.
100%.
And I think we're not excluding the larger homes, it's just it's opening an untapped market that isn't here right now, that would allow for smaller dwellings.
Yeah.
If the market demand is there, if the market demand doesn't end up being there, they're not gonna get built because no one's gonna fill them, the developer's not gonna put them in. But what we were hearing from stakeholders, again, they have their own facts and opinions, and we're just bringing it forward, that regionally, there is a demand for more affordable, owner-occupied, first-time homes, that the smaller the unit, typically the cheaper it is, and that market isn't here. In surrounding communities, it is, and they're seeing a boom. And that's that balance of striking between owner-occupied, renter-occupied, and how do we start to create a carve-out to allow that flexibility? So this is something that we wanted to get the commission's thoughts on. And is this something that we should approach? Is this something that we shouldn't? I know that there's a lot of strong feelings about this within the community, and so we're taking the pulse of you first.
I think based off of the economic realities of this region, it's a good move. It's also, you know, when you have that smaller, like, allowable footprint, it also puts it more in the range of something that can be self-built. I just love DIY content. I spend a lot of time watching like DIY home build stuff. So if there are people out there that want to do that, and they want places to do that. So I just think that looking at just what is possible for a homeowner to build safely on their own property, you know, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I like it.
The only thing I would chime in on is, with the administrative waiver that we have increased, I believe 20%, well, in draft form is increased to 20%. I would increase the square footage requirement
1,200.
to at least
That's what I said,
1,200.
1,200.
That way, we are getting no less than 1,000 square feet for, and I would also, in this.
Because if the waiver came in to lower the.
Yeah, because a lot of our smaller, just infill builders, they already use that administrative waiver, they're aware of it.
Mhm.
So if we increase that administrative waiver and then decrease the square footage, we're getting an 800 square foot house. And I know some existing residential neighborhoods have that,
I
but
say
I don't think that's where we want to.
And my thing is, you can't do anything with it, and me as someone who tries to get home, it's hard. And I keep hearing stories, you know, people, oh my gosh, back in 1965, that family had a 1 bedroom with 800 square foot, and they raised 5 kids with it, and I'm like, where did everybody see that?
People have a
But
lot
it
of
did.
stuff.
But then I realized,
It's
and
a
that's the thing.
self-storage facility.
And that's where, you know, so, you know, I wanna get away from that, plus I want us to be able to make money, and I do. And to me, that's why I was like, I'm thinking, okay, I like 1,000, but I think we need to bump it to 1,200 square feet. Because I know we have that market, and we are looking at things where it's hard to get everybody to, in our area, to wanna build here. And one is, people say it's unaffordable, but then we have the pushback saying, oh, well, you know, now we're gonna have lower homes. I'm like, I want home ownership. I want people I want it to go from looking, saying, what is it, 60-something% is renters in our area? Like, I want that to go away. And how do we get that to go away? We have people who will not think about buying homes, to buy homes in our city, and then people to come in saying, oh, I don't need that big old building, and I like this structure, so I would think about making that my first home or my forever home. So I know it's only 300 square feet, but I think it's a big.
I agree. I didn't even think of the waiver, so extremely valid point, especially once we get into like multifamily dwellings. That's like the big issue with detached single-family homes is the efficiency issue, right? The home efficiency, you know, it's just the least efficient form of housing for both energy and like, you know, sprawl. So you don't want them to be too small, otherwise you just make the efficiency issue like worse by sheer numbers. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Other than infill lots, most of this is gonna be planned developments that's gonna come to us.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be waived for the planned development if you wanted to, right?
I think they're proposing a change to how planned development works, correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Just trying to avoid the usage of planned developments as much.
The intent would be to hopefully refine the standards, the base standards enough that there'd be less reliance on the PDs.
But for this type of thing, you're probably gonna have quite a few houses being built, and they'd be asking for, you know, for certain square footage, right? Which is what the planned developments are.
Any new subdivisions would then just fall under, if they're not a planned development route, and let's say they're meeting our set development standards, they would just be treated as a subdivision where you guys would truly just see that preliminary and final plat. You wouldn't see a preliminary development plan or that final development plan.
But how many subdivisions have we seen here in the last few years?
Well, and that's the other point of, whenever we get there in terms of our site development standards, the minimum lot area, minimum lot width, are those realistic?
Because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but people have been using the planned development sort of as the shortcut to kind of tailor the site development standards for what they want to put there, right? So we
I think
want to
so.
kind of
Yeah.
cut that out
So
and just
then
make our
we've-
standards be
The bar has been set so high that
Yes.
rather than attempting, and the merit behind setting the bar so high was to get the developers to push, right? And certainly that's an aspiration I think be warranted. But rather than actually getting across the bar, they have just abused the PUD route to just set their own standards. Which I think is why you've seen so many residential developments just go the PUD route, because meeting non-market expectations compared to just PUD, and then asking, you know, through the deal making, they're gonna ask for more than what they would really need to get across the finish line. Now we're in a really complex negotiation through a board and zoning, or a planning commission, board and commission. Now it's became that much more difficult.
And
They're
sometimes.
gonna have so much money in it that, you know, they're pretty sure they're gonna be able to sell these units.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes the PD is used because the standards are not realistic. They don't match where, I mean, we also find that if the market is, I'm not saying this is an example, I mean, it doesn't necessarily apply, but if the market is like compact residential, 10,000 square foot lots, that's what we need, but community X is requiring 30,000 square. Well, it's always gonna fall to a PD because you can't, the market isn't going for large lots anymore, the demand isn't there. And so that's where most codes will start to build in the flexibility by lowering the minimums, so that the PDs no longer necessarily come in except in really creative circumstances, because you've allowed the flexibility where there is that varying scale and all different types of housing can come in. And what we're hearing through the stakeholder interviews is these worked at some point, but right now it's not reflecting where the market is heading, the type of housing that we're starting to see regionally. So in order to get that in Middletown from the development community is be more flexible, expand what that is, reduce some of the minimums to allow those other types of housing to come into the community that don't exist at the moment. And that's what I think Claire was touching on, was that when and we'll get to it, when we start talking about the development standards, looking at these lot sizes, are these actually realistic? Or are they actually realistic? Or another question is, what's on the ground now, are they even reflecting this? Because the city's currently also doing a side-by-side inventory of parcels to see, are our existing parcels even matching with what the development code is? Because if it's not, you just have a non-conforming issue across the board, then we really should reevaluate those further.
And too bad Mr. Cash isn't here, because he could probably speak a little bit about this too, but like the Board of Zoning Appeals, we get like, we had a slew of ones last year for, people that wanted to develop on like non-conforming lot sizes.
Oh,
where-
this was a staff error.
Oh, that was a staff error?
Yeah,
Okay.
1000% a staff error on that. That was my staff error.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
because of Claire, we had a slew of them.
They were refunded if.
Oh, good, cause maybe think we were just trying to.
Okay, well, I didn't know that, never mind.
So just to get to circle back on this, just to make sure that we're very clear on where the commission stands, is it the commission comfortable with lowering the single story down, but to a 1,200, so it accounts for that 20%? And
I think I am.
see where that goes from there?
Yeah, I mean, when I was talking earlier, I didn't know about the changes to the administrative waiver. Actually, I forgot about the waiver entirely. So like, that's definitely a more educated, nuanced take on it, but it's like,
Okay.
just trying to talk about the driving philosophy behind why I liked that. was-
And I think laying out that story for not only yourself as the commission, but it's gonna be important for council too, to lay it out, about why. And I think it has some backing to it. Okay. Perfect.
Next item.
Well, let's continue the discussion on development standards, and this gets back to the development standard table. So the current development standards for residential zoning districts require a minimum lot size. What we have on the screen is what is currently your minimum lot size. For R1, it's 30,000 square feet, R2 is 18, R3 is 13,000, and then I've just set a range depending on housing type for R4, because it just depends what type of product. Is it a 2-family, 3-family, a single family, attached? Lots of different variations. But as we're talking about looking at reducing the square footage requirement for the ranch single family, we also took a look at maybe these lot sizes aren't necessarily feasible or matching where development's heading. Could we look at potentially reducing the minimum lot size requirements to better reflect where the industry is heading and where planning practice is heading? And so our tact here was, after doing an analysis of these lot sizes, comparing it to best practice, then comparing it to regional communities, we're recommending that we actually reduce some of these, particularly the R2 and R3, reducing the overall minimum lot size by approximately 3,000. So R2 would come down to 15, R3 would come down to 10. And this was our first tact. Now, the R1, that's your traditional single family, your lowest density. 30,000 square feet is a large lot. We haven't, at least at this point, put forth a number, but this is something we wanted to talk with you about, is that, is R1 at 30,000 square feet even feasible?
I was like, do we even have enough for multiple properties like that to exist now?
For
I'm talking
reference,
about
the,
sprawl this whole-
the Miller
this whole
Ridge
time.
property, you guys saw a recent plan
Yes.
development application for, that is zoned R1.
Mhm.
Will it ever be developed as R1? I don't know, so.
Okay.
What did those come in at?
They were ranging, there was 50-foot width lots, there was 60-foot width lots, there's 70-foot width lots, 80-foot width lots, and then there was estate lots that were a minimum acre size. And if I recall correctly, the surrounding residents were more keen on 70-foot width lots, 80-foot width lots.
Yeah, we didn't want any 50.
Which is very unique,
But
cause
it was
if you
that
look at our
area.
current site development standards, 70-foot width lots, that's a minimum lot width for an R4 parcel. To be that would be created today.
Mhm.
So they would be more comfortable with an R4 zoning, straight zoning.
Mhm.
And I don't wanna speak out of turn for the residents, this is just how I was gleaning from them. 70 and 80-foot width lots, as the lots were increasing, it seemed they would be more comfortable as we got closer to, not even the R3 zoning district, site development standards.
So what you're saying is based off of what you were interpreting the comments as, is that the lot sizes were too large for some of them, and
No, just
No,
the
okay.
50-foot width lots were not desirable.
Okay.
The 60-foot width
Yeah.
lots were not necessarily that
Mhm.
desirable, but I remember some comments that I would be okay with 70-foot width lots, I would be okay with 80-foot width lots.
And it had to do with
It was
the value on their house.
It was,
Yeah.
and my issue was my thing was for that, where that was located.
Okay.
And bringing it that low to 50, to me, I think would be disrespectful for what they were trying to build in that area to what it was. But then looking even more so, like, I had an issue with the developer as a whole, and even what he was trying to propose, and I'm like, if you're gonna fit that cookie cutter type home in that location, in such big development, can't you put it somewhere else, like those types?
Mhm.
But then I looked at seeing what would that entail corporate use, like what it looks like to me wasn't, I don't think it was appealing, so I think in a whole, the 70 and 80, and even the acre was more desirable, especially with all that land, and then plus we had the issue with some other things that they were trying to propose on that lot that I don't think we.
Yeah.
And that's what
the-
you're gonna,
the
that's
whole
what you're gonna.
transportation.
And I think so.
That's what you're gonna find if you reduce these. If somebody wants to put them in, the neighboring homes think, well, that's much smaller than mine, it's
yeah.
gonna reduce the value of my house. And that's what we heard with the.
Yeah.
It was.
And people will always be opposed to any sort of new development on that grounds, but, like, yeah, for me, the problem with that development was that, like I was talking about, it's the 50-foot lots, pretty much postage stamp, not really, but like, it was trying to cram the most, or the least efficient, like the most of the least efficient form of housing in together, and on a very like well-preserved, like wooded property. That was my main opposition to it, but alongside the very poor, like, entrance into it, but
Plus,
we're not here to
yeah.
talk about that.
Well, then the other
but-
thing is, they were doing 50, but the price point was still outrageous
Mhm.
to me. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, let's remove that, have more expensive homes and that are more desirable for that area and those landowners and also the properties that already exist. Let's cater to that and remote, because, you know, I don't wanna, plus, I mean, I don't wanna have overcrowdedness at what expense, and then we have other issues that kinda came in with that development, so I guess I guess it goes down to how much of a disadvantage would it be reducing the square footage of R2 and R3?
I mean,
Like how much, like how?
personally, I think shaving 3,000 off of that brings it to the wholer, rounder numbers. I think, I mean, I like that.
Oh, you're right,
but-
15.
So
Yeah.
then with that,
15.
what we also did is we made sure that your lot
Mhm.
depth and minimums were also consistent with that. So they're still gonna be able to hit that minimum.
Mhm.
So you looked at the setbacks also?
Mhm.
and the widths to make sure
Yeah.
that they align with that.
Yeah, cause your setbacks now are like in a stair-stepped approach. And our recommendation was to have them consistent. So our recommendation was, you know, if it's like 6, 5, let's say it's 7, 6, and 5, just have them 5. 5 is a minimum. And you can always have larger setbacks. And so it's more of just trying to have development be more
Then it will
consistent.
be flexible, yeah.
And that adds more flexibility to the site, it allows development to occur. We didn't play with the heights. The heights, that is very typical height for residential, 35 feet is generous, especially when you have a pitched roof. It didn't really need to go higher than that. We did recommend some increases in heights when it came to your R4. Just
For the more dense housing to accommodate, yeah.
Yeah, just to allow that, and and when I say an increase, I'm talking like 5 feet, I'm not talking 20, 30 feet increases. It's mainly to add that larger floor plate, especially in mixed use, you have your commercial on the bottom, you wanna allow the units on top. It also.
Variances in roof heights and types as well.
Correct.
I mean, overall, I like the changes. I really don't know how I would feel about changing the R1, like I've been saying this whole time, anti-sprawl, but also that's like I feel like that's one of those things that you gotta be careful, like messing around with that one in particular, because of the affinity that people who like that kind of housing have for it, and you know, they wanna preserve, the skin in the game that they already have.
Right.
But as far as the R2 and R3, I like.
What is, I mean, Claire, I know we had talked about the R1 and this 30,000 and the feasibility. Do you have any additional insights as you've reviewed development applications or looked at the parcel maps of where that 30,000 that maybe could help provide some greater clarity to planning commission?
So in terms of applications, the only one I've seen for an R1 zoning district was the one that you all have seen as well. There was another recent application prior to my time for, if you guys look at the back here, this parcel up here.
Pizza's here.
That one failed, the applicant withdrew
Something, I smelled it.
prior to a city council hearing.
Where are we at? At the tip of our, it's.
This is the only R1 zoning district.
Is that by where the,
Wait, really?
is that by where the trucking thing?
Okay, then honest question, why do we even have it? Why do we not just collapse it into something a little more developable?
Well,
For the reasons I would say you just explained.
well.
Fair enough.
You did a great job.
Fair enough.
I mean, you could speak for us, you got this.
I mean, yeah,
Oh.
and then if you look at this, everything that Casey, our zoning, or GIS administrator did, everything in red is a non-conforming lot, according to our R1 zoning district standards.
Mhm.
So, well, I should say, just the lot area, square footage part of it. So, is there consideration if our R1 zoning district is even feasible? Looking at the number of parcels that she called out, which is 97 parcels in the R1 zoning district and 53 are non-conforming according to our minimum lot area, square footage requirements.
Was the non-conforming lots, was Casey able to determine what the average square footage of those non-conforming lots were?
I did not ask her that.
Okay. Cause I'd be curious to see what those are. I mean, if they look relatively small. So that may be something we wanna look at, because if planning commission is open to modifying R1, we may wanna look at what those non-conforming lots are coming in at, and that may be a starting point for where R1 potentially could head, or at least be in that vicinity.
Roger, do you recall in the 2018 development code update if there was like across the board a reduction in the site development standards for the residential districts?
Just make sure.
I don't recall. I really don't.
gotta suck it in.
I think there's a change in the setback rules.
Setbacks?
Do you guys wanna take a break to eat?
I guess.
Sorry, I said go ahead and dig in. Yeah, we should've had a formal break.
I mean,
It's,
yeah, I mean, do we wanna?
Yeah.
If you wanna take us away on the next slide.
So if you think of the square footage like a slice of pizza.
Or a parking meter.
So kind of in line with our conversations about lot width and minimum square footage, you currently have a requirement right now where you provide both a minimum width and a minimum depth, and then also provide a minimum square footage. So one of our, and we haven't built it in, but one of the items that we wanted to bring this forward to consideration is, you already specify one of the factors to get area. Is it really necessary to bring in that other factor and specify depth and width? So our kind of food for thought for commission is there in your mind a benefit to keeping the lot depth standard as it exists today? Or can we achieve the same standard that by specifying a minimum square footage and then just specifying a width, being that the width of the property is most often than not what the normal everyday person is going to be interacting with the site as opposed to the depth? Should we focus on the width and let the minimum square footage work itself out? So initial thoughts and reactions. You won't see that in the draft. We still have, again, minimum depth and width established, but.
I mean, are there any drawbacks to that you can think of?
Of removing it?
Of removing the depth requirement?
Maybe for odd size lots, maybe?
Potentially.
But as long as it meets the minimum square footage, you know, like you said, it just kind of maths itself out, you know?
Because would this be like that issue we had with Wawa? It was we were.
My issue with Wawa was that.
Oh, that's a-
yeah, that's a
well,
whole.
forget
It was an abuse of the plan development.
Well, yeah, and I think, yeah, because that was, I mean, there were so many, but I think they were trying to say the building is right. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of. So, I don't know. I
There's
mean, I
only one
do.
structure when there needed to be multiple, there's PD, at least as I interpret it, the verbiage is to encourage pedestrian.
Mhm.
A Wawa is like anti-pedestrian, as cars go around every bit of the building.
It is, I mean, when you think, I mean, I frequent the.
There's like less than 25% of that, like,
And it
that
is.
minimum.
Like, I didn't even know there was a front door. Like, they literally have a front door on Liberty that no one would ever in life use, but it is a sidewalk and a front door. And I'm like, I just now noticed it, and I don't know how long it's been there. I mean, I just noticed it. It's been there for.
When you're talking about the one down in Liberty, like at Cincinnati.
Yeah,
Road
because that's the
and,
one, yeah, and it is,
Well-
first of all, it's set back toward, I think it's too close to the street.
Mhm.
And if you look directly across the street, there is a brand new UDF, and it is pushed back. In fact, I think all the stores are pushed back except for that one. I'm like, what? But that's a whole different, I don't know, their.
Yeah, I
regulations,
hate,
so
I
guess
hate
it
that
would be-
intersection personally, but.
So if you reduce the lot size, are you gonna change the setback requirements for the building?
I guess that's fine.
Because one of the issues I know we had, I spent a couple of years on the appeals board, and in the Renaissance, there was, the setback came back to the very back door of this lady's house, and they wanted to put a small deck on the back, and they'd have to get a variance in order to do that. And of course, if you reduce the lot size, you kinda need to change the setback rules perhaps.
With that, is we have proposed some reductions in the setback. I think that was really looking at more of surrounding and like kind of best practice, but there, yeah, we can certainly refine it further.
I mean, I don't know what you need, I just wanted to bring that up since you're talking about reducing the lot size.
The lot widths themselves, yeah. We were analyzing it through that lens, but I mean, there's certainly more refinement that can be done, but we were trying to at least capture that aspect of it.
Oh,
You wanna give him that?
Sorry, anybody else?
No, I might get another slice in a few, so. Hmm.
But we did look at modifying the setbacks, like on the R1 with a 30,000 square foot lot, a 50-foot front yard setback is extensive. That's large, so bringing it down to 40, but so it still has that estate feel to it. And the R2 and the R3 was lowering the setbacks by 5 feet, nothing substantial, but just trying to expand lot coverage.
Kind of in that, these are all kind of lot size related. Do want to touch on the BC zoning districts, as these all have on the, it's not on this slide, sorry, but in the draft on the far left, there is minimum lot sizes for these districts. Right now, it specifies that the minimum lot size is 217,800 square feet. That really gets us at that 5-acre minimum. The intent there is to have, at least from my perspective, when I'm viewing this, is when you have these minimum lot sizes so large, as you want more comprehensive development being proposed more. So, you know, there is a potential downside to reducing this. You might not get larger development projects that you're seeing in, but you also might be incentivizing development. That might not be
I mean,
due to the minimum lot size itself.
Lowering the minimum doesn't put a cap on, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with lowering the minimum, especially if we're having trouble getting people to comprehensively develop, you know, lots that are that size, maybe something a little bit more manageable might be, so this is for the BC zoning districts, and there's like a couple of those that you guys have split out with the new, with the draft, right? Am I
So the
remembering correctly?
BC zoning districts, so there's there's sub-districts.
Mhm.
We haven't, the new ones that we've done are overlays, which are slightly different, and we'll talk about those. But these are primarily on East End. But I would like you to weigh in on this topic, because we talked about uses that best fit in some of these areas, and I think through part of these discussions, we came to the conclusion collectively to ask this question. So I didn't know if you had anything to add to the conversation regarding the 5 acres.
Yeah, I mean, part of the business center kind of aspirations, you know, when the city had annexed east of the interstate, was to really develop out this kind of suburban feel, high-end R&D, bioscience, biomedical, obviously Atrium Medical Center, the Cleveland Cliffs Research Center were two main catalysts that had kind of gone on there on Union Road. And a lot of the office and flex space that's still outstanding there, really looking for that job creation, but also still upholding some sort of a lot of green space, a lot of landscaping requirements. But then, you know, I guess paradox to that, looking at the BCH district for around the arena. A little bit more of kind of an entertainment district, a little bit higher density feel. As it relates to like BCH, maybe there's some flexibility there in the acreage. I think for what the city's aspiring for that job creation, that sort of campus-like feel on the BCO and the BCF, maybe that acreage minimum is kind of a 5-acre standard's decent. But certainly maybe the H or the BCR, looking at what those standards are.
I would say 5 acres is a lot to carve out, and really anywhere other than maybe the RBCF. I mean,
And then which one is that? RBC?
BCF is, it's our flex district, so that's where almost your research and development facilities, the Cleveland Cliffs, or maybe indoor manufacturing that's solely indoors. Did I just say that? That is a conditional use there, where we have architectural standards to kind of combat maybe that more, the industrial feel so much. But I'm thinking 5 acres, that is a huge parcel.
Like 5 acres minimum?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think setting the threshold of much lower and then letting a developer take a bite of whatever huge farm parcel that they wanted, and then maybe 5 years down the road, somebody else comes in and takes the rest of it and develops out, but I just think we're almost selling ourselves out for any new lot creations in our BC zoning districts.
So do you think maybe a 3 acre?
2.5, straight,
I was,
cut it in half.
In our BCF, maybe 2.5, and then the rest is just an acre. I mean,
Yeah.
just compared to like our well, soon to be C zoning districts, I mean, it's like, what, 20,000 for a B2 zoning district versus 217,000.
oh, you're right.
Yeah, it's like, that's like a whole
Okay.
magnitude.
That is,
I mean,
so bringing it closer means,
Yeah, I just think that's
especially
the,
for the,
I understand the intent behind it, but the
have to
minimum
be
standards
realistic.
here, like.
Sure.
it's-
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, how many of those sites out there are 5 acres, or all, like, all of the ones to the east end, like, are those all on 5 acre parcels?
For the BCF, outside of, I think, some former residential out parcels, a lot of them are like hundreds of acres.
Okay, fair enough. yeah.
Union Red,
I don't know how big
Grand
an
River.
acre is in my mind, I really should get that in there.
well, remember how
4,003,
many acres the
43,
one thing was
560.
last week? The, whatever the place is.
The specifics on those numbers go out my brain the second
Oh,
that
after you get it,
my,
yeah.
that my.
Cause I
eyes
didn't
go
realize
off
it was
the
that
paper.
big, and it is not closed, it was open.
Which one are you
The
talking about?
the building across from, Tractor Supply.
Oh, yeah, the Masonic Temple,
Yep, the temple.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That one, I think that
It
one's
was-
deceptively
It was like
big.
They were there, cause it.
Cause it's
Seven or
covered, it's like
Yeah, 7 or
flanked
was
on
it
all
8?
sides by arterial roads, and
I
that
thought
just
it was
kinda
8.
dwarfs it.
And I was like, that's 8 acres, but I guess it was,
Mhm.
It goes back pretty
it
far.
goes.
And the only time you ever see it, nobody's walking around there, you never see it from the human scale, you only see it at car scale, so it looks smaller because you're zooming by it,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I noticed because there was 2 homeless, we did a homeless camp next Tuesday, and there was 2 homeless people. One dude had 2 sets of like couch pillows, and I was like, oh no, please don't go into that wooded area, please don't, I'm not going up there. Anybody wanna join me Tuesday night from
Tuesday night's my
8:30
D&D
to
night,
Is
so.
there
about 1?
Point in time count?
Point in
That
time
is
count.
5.4316 acres.
Oh, it's not, okay, it's fine. So
What
it
is-
is,
oh,
it
that's-
is fine.
The
Okay.
Masonic Temple.
Really?
2 parcels.
Okay,
Oh,
so
that's
that's about the
nice.
size that we're talking about there.
That's a lot.
Okay. That is a lot, but that's not as much as I was thinking to develop comprehensively, but I do think that lowering that minimum
Oh,
would
yeah.
probably be beneficial. It's just like, do we bring it down to 3, we bring it down to 2.5, how do we balance that decision, you know? I feel like as far as a minimum goes, you know, like, it doesn't hurt to go lower to a certain point,
Yeah.
Well,
but.
I do think you eventually do run into a law of diminishing returns.
Yeah,
After
that's true.
maybe 2.5 to
Mhm.
2, I
Yeah.
mean, when you start getting to an acre
Mhm.
and you're really looking at 10,000 square foot facilities,
Mhm.
I mean, I think you start to delve out of the intent of kind of that BCF.
That's true, and
BCR
it's the
district.
intent of other zones.
In looking at maybe a comparable in the community like Hook Drive, the industrial park there, or Emerald Way, kind of a 2 to 3 acres, it's comparable. Now granted, there'd be a lot more landscaping requirements to about a
Mhm.
30, 40, 50,000 square foot building,
Mhm.
which I think would be a comparable to like a small industrial facility. So I think 2 to 3 acres is kind of,
Yeah.
again, this is just from an economic impact, not trying to drive the conversation, but.
No, I mean,
where
it's a
you
valuable
see
perspective for sure.
Diminishing return thereafter.
Yeah, you're right about the diminishing returns. I mean, I think somewhere in that 2.5 to 3 range is kind of the sweet spot if we're lowering.
For reference, B2 zoning district minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. B3, there is no minimum lot size. I1, 10,000 square feet, and then our heaviest industrial is 5,000, so it.
Really? That's the minimum lot
Minimum,
size?
so that's what.
For
the-
heavy industrial?
For what it would take if you as a property owner wanted to
Mhm.
split off a parcel
Mhm.
to sell off to somebody else.
Ah, okay.
So
I see.
it's not that, to say that a larger parcel can't be developed,
Mhm.
or, I mean, obviously Cleveland Cliffs is acres upon acres.
Mhm.
But it's it sets the minimum standards.
What was the size of that biogas that we looked
It
at?
was 26 acres.
26 acres?
But that was already parceled out.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I feel like 3 is kind of where my mind is landing. So, I don't know, maybe best to put a pin in that one, unless anybody else has something to say.
I don't have an opinion on
Okay, so, another topic of discussion, and is certainly kind of two-part, is we have kind of at the direction of, again, trying to create a better consistency with your comprehensive plan. We've brought in and addressed these certain areas that are called out in your comp plan. They're called special interest areas. They're part of kind of they're more finite sites in your larger development opportunity areas that are called out in your comprehensive plan. There are a total of 8 identified within the comp plan. And right now, the standards, or I wouldn't even call them standards, but your comprehensive plan provides for these areas a general vision, various types of desired land uses, and then some rough development guidelines, but by no means are these standards. So if we want to put more teeth behind these standards or these guidelines, we have the opportunity as part of this code to codify actual zoning regulations. But that's a lot, and it'd certainly add on to the number of regulations that city staff would have to take a look at, planning commission would also have to review. So we, instead of going in and creating these all entirely new zones with all new development standards and specific uses, we've taken the approach of bringing in and recognizing these special interest areas that exist in your comprehensive plan, but recognizing them as overlay zones. The degree and the next step to how we use that overlay zone is what we really want to talk about. The way that we have proposed incorporating your special interest areas, or at least calling them out, is to create a zoning overlay that would essentially enforce each of these specific areas. I'm not sure if they're called that in the staff report, but here's just an example. To have an implementing overlay zone that would apply to these areas that wouldn't necessarily codify additional standards, but it would instead be used as a reference to direct someone to go look at the comp plan, to say, hey, here are the zoning standards, you have an overlay zone on top of this, go check out the guidelines in the comprehensive plan before you submit your application. That's how at least we've teed it up. We haven't applied any additional standards to these areas, but we certainly could if you wanted more teeth behind these overlay zones, in which we are dictating out new development standards that would deviate from the base zones, from the base standard. So there are a total of 8 of these. I'm not sure if it would be, you want to walk through them?
Well, I think what we can kind of leave it up for a minute on each of these so you can see them if you're not familiar with each of these areas. My recommendation is if you want to dig into these further, I would reference the comprehensive plan. I would look back at these. The comprehensive plan is that visionary document that the city prepared. And so these areas are highlighted as opportunity areas with visionary concepts, but as Michael stated, they're in a guideline form. So there's no regulatory component to it. It's kind of like a wish list for these areas. But in trying to create that consistency between your comp plan and your zoning, we're trying to bridge that gap. And that's through an overlay zone that's not as restrictive, because overlay zones can become very restrictive. And the tack that we're taking, at least right now, unless planning commission feels otherwise, is to just refer out to the guidelines and say, when putting an application forth in this area, please look at the guidelines, and if you can, try to incorporate that, but we can't necessarily, wouldn't force it. Unless the planning commission said, no, actually, if we're gonna have an overlay zone, we want some more enforceable rules, then we can go to that edge.
Well, most of the ones you have here are in historic districts. So
Some are.
So they've got their own requirements.
Right, and that's where I think, where Michael was talking about, that's where I think the tact of referring to the guidelines in the comp plan is better than adding additional standards on top of it. Because when you add additional standards, then you get into the complexities, are we creating, incompatibilities between standards, and that can get really messy. Not just for you, the planning commission, when you review projects, but for staff, when reviewing applications. So what we've done here is, instead of talking about these special interest areas in this high level, and you're like, what one is that? We basically have a slide per special interest area, so you can see the map that's in the comprehensive plan. And then what we've done is we've dropped like the purpose statement in for this area, and we've just bolded what the intent is supposed to be. So for instance, on the Central Avenue corridor, the intent is to have a walkable neighborhood serving area that includes residential uses, focuses on pedestrian activity, multimodal, meaning looking beyond just the vehicle, bike lanes, all kinds of stuff like that. But then is really reflective of having compatible transitions between developments, so that you don't have those incompatible breaks between like commercial, residential, and so forth. So that's what the comprehensive plan is envisioning, as part of Lisa, this special interest area.
I mean, I'm kind of two minds on this, because yes, I want more teeth so that, you know, things can be developed to the vision, but also, like, I think that people, like, I'm interested in it, like, allowing people to build, like, what's possible to build, just like safely, rather than like kind of micromanaging it, like legislating like possibilities away. So that's even in my notes where I'm just kind of like writing down, like kind of reasoning it out. It's like codifying. It's easier to establish the standards, but then it's harder to change those down the line versus just having like the overlay as like a reference, like a wish list, really. But then, you know, a wish list doesn't have teeth. So like
Correct.
So I'd be interested to hear others' thoughts on that.
I mean,
Is across the street also considered part of the paperboard site? Like, because I know there's that
Wait.
entrance to town corridor that I've heard
Is it
the.
across the street, the Oakland?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's part of the, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
part of the
Special,
Oakland.
yep.
Yeah.
okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Used to be Armco.
Adoy.
Rolling
Okay.
mills.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting that is.
See, if you
See,
get older.
I have
There you
different
go.
names of the neighborhoods because my parents, yeah, they got some crazy names. Yeah, they still, if you're over 60.
Yeah.
well,
I
say
think
over
in terms of
65.
landmarks rather than neighborhoods,
Yeah.
but honestly, it's because the different neighborhoods could have a little bit more individual flair and flavor, you know.
But I
But
guess,
So I guess from this topic, we're just, at a base level minimum,
mhm.
is the approach that we're recommending of relying on a wish list guideline without applying more regulations on top of these areas, is that something that the planning commission is okay with, or do you think that more regulatory standards need to come into play to implement?
I think they
So-
could in some of these. In other words, there's a lot of room for development on that side,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of room to develop on the Oakland side.
Mhm.
But you get to the South Main Street,
Yep,
there isn't a whole lot, unless you're gonna tear down 150-year-old houses.
unless redevelopment comes in, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's when.
In the same way with, Central Avenue.
Yep.
Unless we take down everything historic.
Well, again, that's what it is.
There are people that will go with it.
You've been quiet tonight.
You might get to speak now.
I like the comprehensive plan,
I just said,
Mhm.
like,
and I would be in favor of giving it more teeth, to put it very simply.
Yeah.
I think new development could benefit from it, but I just don't wanna overshoot and then rule us out from.
having
Yeah,
new
exactly.
development, because I think that has been a common thing I've heard from anyone, why they don't come to Middletown, because of those strict things that we have. And I'm like, well, I don't wanna not attract people, or the same type of people come in where we're not really adding to our.
So maybe this is a have our cake and eat it too thought, but can we pick and choose which ones that we want to codify and maybe ones that we wanna have like guidelines on? Cause like the central corridor, that one is one where I feel like we should be more strict. Town mall redevelopment, that one should be more strict. But like, you know, let's say the Oakland neighborhood or the South Main district, that one is more like the wish list, you know? But I don't know if that means turning it into like two different types of special, you know, which makes it more complex, or if it's just like, for this one, we're going to be applying more standards to, so that we can encourage the development that we want, but with some of the others, this is more like, we're interested in in nudging development the way that we want, but not with as much of a heavy hand, you know? So, like I said, maybe this is a have our cake and eat it too moment, but, it's just an idea. And then how do we determine which ones that we pick and choose is the next question, but,
Well,
yeah.
my initial thought is, and Michael, wait, here. My initial thought is we either apply standards on all of them or none of them.
Fair enough.
Then what we start doing is we're starting to prioritize areas, and then who's making that priority? Who's, I could see council going, well, why not this one?
Mhm.
And why that one? And honestly, we don't have a foundation for why.
That's true.
And so, I don't know if somebody else wants to weigh in here from the city's perspective.
Yeah, from a development perspective, codifying these into a special interest area to say, please refer back to the comp plan, really, what are we aspiring to do here? That's taking it one step further than where it's at now.
Mhm.
I think if you get to a point of overburdening some of these sites, you're gonna start inhibiting the interest, because not only are they going through regular zoning regulations, now they have to overlay and make direct, you know, if this is more of an aspiring and they get 60%, great, but now if it's a to the teeth, they have to meet XYZ parameter through these overlay districts, I think you're just gonna make it that much harder for redevelopment.
That's true. But to that end, like, I guess I would need to see more about what the actual, like, the specific standards for each of the special interest zones are. Like, these are just the purpose statements, right? These aren't the actual, like.
Correct.
So
This is what we, in looking at the vision for each of these interest areas, looking at the development, the desired development, and then the desired land uses, we read all of those and then kind of distilled that into a purpose statement for this overlay zone. This isn't, this description was informed by the comp plan.
Of course, yeah.
So I just give you an example. In the east end, I'm just gonna turn this around so people can see this. In the east end, when we get to discussing these special interest areas, it gives the types of uses that it envisions, site guidelines, and then building standard guidelines. So in the east end, for example, it talks about, there should be pedestrian connections in between developments and connecting to roadways and trails. Open spaces are provided, both passive and active, including parks, gathering spaces, gardens. New development in the district should include landscaping and buffering elements, specifically counting trees and perimeter screening. Parking areas should be laid out this specific way. The building should have varying heights and roof styles. So these are all great wish list items. That if we were to codify and make standards, we would actually go through each of these and go, okay, what perimeter screening is appropriate for the east end? And you can create additional screening standards for that confined area. Or a parking lot would have to be laid out a certain way, or access. So it can pigeonhole developments. And if we want to remain flexible, going the guideline route, the aspirational view might be better. That is ultimate flexibility. So that's what we're.
But from our side of it, like, let's say that we go with like the wish list route, and then we have something that's before us that's like, it doesn't hit any of the wish list items, but there's not really any other sort of like objection that we can really make to it, you know, like, how do we balance that? Is that like a desirable route to go? Like, at what point is it like, this development is more valuable than our wish list standards? Like how, that's just kinda like what's going through my mind when I'm thinking about like wish list versus codifying, you know? So, and it's the whole teeth problem.
Well,
you know?
development would still have to adhere to the residential and non-residential design standards, which are pretty stringent and
Yeah.
prescriptive.
Mhm.
So you would still have those aspects to it, but it would just be a wish list. It would be, please take this into consideration when. The only time you can start to require it is if it's like conditions of approval.
Mhm.
On certain projects, you can start to make some of these conditions of approval, potentially, depending on the use. But you're right, you're not guaranteed any of it. You're
Yeah.
just kinda hoping that they will
So,
take it into
And
account.
relying on the base, and really relying on the base standards that we've crafted and mulled over and looked at allowable land uses and development standards, and really hoping to rely on those to provide that foundation. Overlays could be in addition to that.
So I think that this seems like a topic that is gonna be worked on a little bit more. I would just make an appeal to planning commission to take a look at the comp plan.
Yeah.
Take a look at those special interest areas, and see what those, it's all of 8 pages in the comp plan out of 100.
There's more than 100, that's for sure.
So take a look, I would recommend taking a look at that, and I think it might provide a little more clarity. And if you have any questions related to that, I would just recommend, Claire, they reach out to you. And
Yeah.
then we can always follow up on a call.
I was thinking, at your next planning commission meeting, we'll just do a presentation of the special interest areas.
Do you think you could put like a couple mock cases in there? Like, here's how this would look if we codified it, and here's how it would look if we just had a reference to the comprehensive plan for case A, case B, something like that. It would help me understand
Like
that.
like if you took the riverfront special interest area, what if it was codified and what if it wasn't?
Yeah, and a couple examples of proposed uses and how those might differ based on which direction we want to go. That'd help me understand like the
It would give you,
implication of this.
yeah, it's a tangible example
Yeah.
that you can look at. Yeah, we can talk about providing something like that.
Not to give you more work, Claire, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, this is definitely one that I'll have to, you know, mull over some more. It's a very, it's like either choice doesn't really, I feel like, solve the core problem, but it's like trying to identify what the core problem is. Is it that these areas just aren't attractive for people to build in already, which is why we've designated, like, never mind.
Well,
I had a thought
I
on
think
this.
also it's very prominent in the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan actually has special interest as a land use designation.
Okay.
So that's where this overlay conversation came in, because it's not an overlay in your comp plan, it is a land use designation for the future. And it's like, okay, well, something needs to implement it to some degree, and that's where we're like, standalone wouldn't make sense.
Mhm.
Rely on a base district, and overlay is probably the best route, but do you go more prescriptive or do you go more guideline?
I think guidelines to start, and after, let's say, like, you know, 3 to 5 years, if we're not seeing the guidelines helping, then that's maybe something to revisit. Does that make sense? Like we've got these special interest areas, we're using the guidelines, but things are not shaking out the way that's like we want the guidelines to help with. You know, only time will really tell if they help, or like, I think it's a fantastic idea, but like, whether or not it's enough teeth to achieve the the special interest, you know?
What Jacob touched on, right now, no one's really referencing it.
Mhm.
So this at least puts us in the applicant's vision.
Mhm.
This is what would like to see and
Yeah.
anticipate, so it's a good step in that direction.
It gives you a zoning district that a developer can come in and say, okay, here's zoning X, Y, Z. But now I have an additional layer here that maybe it is top 100 special interest area. Oh, we should probably be making sure this is high tech, it's industrial, it's manufacturing focused. That it's not just, okay, because it's zoning, I can do self-storage. Well, the special interest area doesn't really call for that. So let's make sure to, go in with a fine tooth comb. Make sure you try to hit on what we're looking to see here.
Yeah.
And I think from an administrative perspective, it's something we can point back to that says, yeah, this is I-2 land, you can do whatever you want within I-2 zoning. We do have a comp plan and a special interest overlay here that points to this and says, hey, this is, while you can do it here, this is the city's vision. So this is why we may be recommending don't go this route.
Yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, it helps click a little better.
But we'll, to that end, we will work with staff to come up with some tangible examples for you.
Thank you.
It sounds like staff will be following up.
Actually, I did have something that I wanted to say about the town mall special area. Okay, yeah, when I was reading through it initially earlier, I missed where it was talking about having the multimodal connectivity, but I see it's highlighted here, so never mind. I wanted to just have that kind of verbiage in there, because I didn't see it, compared to some other spots, but looks like I just missed it, so.
All right. Oh.
Is that it?
I got
No,
excited.
it says
now.
38 more slides.
No, I think it's,
Hey,
it's
it's
29
exciting.
of 38, so it's 10 more.
Oh, yeah, 20.
Yeah, we're almost there. Okay,
I'm sorry.
so the next chapter, they get exponentially smaller after this, so we are, yes.
Yeah.
You got through the
New
meat of it,
chapters.
Yes. So this is the chapter that follows 1204. And 1204 was really dedicated to your zoning districts and then the primary land uses. 1206 is dedicated to accessory structures, accessory uses, and temporary uses. So the intent really for this is to provide better detailed standards, expectations, guidelines for these, what are intended to be subordinate but complementary land uses like accessory, retail sales, or outdoor dining, and then our more temporary land uses. So the contents of 1206 consist of some standards for accessory structures, some basics, size, height. These would be structures that would be allowed in addition to a primary structure, so like a single-family home with a shed or a detached garage. Then we get into the allowed structures or the allowed accessory land uses by zoning district. There's a table. Then that's followed by accessory use specific standards, outdoor dining, and then temporary uses like garage sales, and then temporary use specific standards. So we have these uses called out where they're allowed by zone, and then we apply specific operational and zoning standards to them to help guide the use. So the major changes here, not too many. What we did is we did provide a new land use associated for semi-truck parking and delivery truck parking as an accessory use to non-residential activities. We also then clarified additional languages for some existing accessory uses. So porches and decks, construction offices, leasing offices, model homes, and then clarified some language in the satellite antenna and dishes section. So a couple of questions for the commission. One of the areas that immediately kind of stood out to us when we were going over the accessory, the allowance of your accessory structures is your code does a really good job. It's actually one of the more helpful land use tables that I've seen in a code, where It details out all of your allowed accessory structures and uses, and then it specifies where on the properties those can be allowed, in the front yard, in the rear, on the side. And one of the areas that we had kind of flagged when we were going through this is that currently detached garages and carports are only allowed in the rear yard. They would not be allowed on the side of the property. So one of the questions that we wanted to bring forward is, do we see a use case in allowing detached garages and carports? Do we see a use case in those being allowed elsewhere besides the rear of the property?
The city used to sell off partial lots to people. And so they have a large side yard. And I could see somebody wanting to put a garage on it or
Pool
something.
house,
Yeah.
pool house.
Or a house.
We'll probably try to, yeah,
Full house.
yeah.
Sounds like an application's coming in.
Yep.
But they're not all big enough to do a house on.
Well, and to speak on infill.
They're not
cer-
doing that now.
Well, we're getting ready to reopen, specifically for housing construction. Because side lot program for years, it was kind of two paths. The city has about 400 infill lots across the city, across several neighborhoods, mostly the more legacy neighborhoods. A lot of those lots we acquired back in 2012 when the Obama era had a lot of brownfield funds to start getting injected in the cities. City management at the time tried to work through as much blight, to combat blight as they could, so they stretched out the funds as best they could. Previous iterations was a side lot program, where a neighbor could pick up either mow-to-own kind of system, where they would maintain the lot, they would eventually own the lot, and work through that, or just a simple letter of interest. The city ran into issues where, certainly there are some lots that we cannot build. They're too narrow, especially with the current development code standards. Now, with the revisions and what's in the draft, it may be more palatable to infill these lots with new homes. But through the side lot program, there was just, basically the return on investment from the cities end just wasn't there. We've started to receive back some of these lots through the mow-to-own. Somebody moved, they no longer own the house, but they have a weird lot, goes into foreclosure, we got it back. So we're trying to tackle that issue with more housing. Again, certainly if there's still a lot of side lots there, that would be great to see, hey, maybe they do a room addition, they expand out their house footprint, they really invest in the community and in their neighborhood by building, by extension, a bigger home, a big detached garage, putting that in. And that's certainly an option, but yeah, I think we'll try to blend through both of those in the future. Sorry, massive tangent.
No.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
Great.
To point number one, though, yes, I think side yards perfectly. Like I've been saying this whole time, I'm interested in allowing homeowners to build what is possible just safely rather than micromanaging what's possible. That's kind of my guiding focus on that. Detached garages and carports, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that one in particular. I'm more interested in number two, but I'll wait.
Any other thoughts on detached in the side, detached garages, carports in the side yard? They would still have to comply with setbacks.
Mhm.
Right, cause I have and you said, I have a neighbor who, which I was gonna send a complaint to him, but they literally did that. And actually, looking at it, it just does a lot, but he has a corner lot. He really couldn't put it in the backyard because it would be in my front yard. And he put it as close to the house as he could, but it is technically in the side yard. It is aligned with, some of our houses from the 60s, 70s and 80s have the garage that extends out. His garage extends out, so it is behind it where the garage is, but it's still, kind of just looks weird. But I understand why. Like I said, he had way more land on the side. It was. So I feel for people in those situations.
Sorry, go ahead.
But no, so I don't know. I think it's impossible, especially carports. Because then you get into the part also in both. more families have more people staying at home, more parking is needed, so that would kinda help that situation. So, I mean, I think I'm okay with visiting.
I would be for it, yeah.
You have anything to add on the detached carports, or?
I think corner lots are especially unique. That seems like one of our top, variance applications is to allow sheds, or, well, really sheds over anything, in the side yard.
Yeah, that's a
Carport.
good point. I think it should be more than just the detached garages and carports.
I would maybe put guardrails on.
On the garage.
On,
Yeah.
I would wanna marinate on that, but I would
Mhm.
think that having some sort of language in there about if it's a corner lot, it shall be, in the rear yard to the maximum extent possible.
Mhm.
However, having some sort of like findings for the development code administrator to point to say it's not feasible, that the backyard's maybe 10 feet deep. So it must be in the technical side yard. I'm just thinking of
And is
an
that,
application.
and
I've seen.
would that be just for sheds, or are you thinking for garages and carports too?
I would wanna marinate on that a little bit more.
Okay.
Something else to marinate on, if we decide to go forward with abolishing depth requirements, might result in situations with larger side yards, and not as much backyards, so something else to consider for that. Which I am kind of in
Good.
favor of
Good.
abolishing the depth, minimum is for, just the square footage based off of the front. You know what I'm trying to say, but, something to consider for sure. An increase in the amount of side yards to expect.
I also think a current use specific standard for detached garages is it has to be, you have to have a paved surface all the way up to that detached garage.
Mhm.
So when somebody wants to put a large detached garage fully in the rear yard, I mean, that could be like 70 feet of concrete or asphalt, since we don't allow gravel.
See, that's, and I have someone where that was the thing.
So maybe if it, if there, a portion of it is technically in the side yard, now we're kind of giving residents a bit of flexibility in terms of, now I don't have to pay 10 grand for that,
Yeah, for that much concrete
for
to
that
be poured,
concrete to be
yeah.
poured, and I can still get this. So
And
this
it,
is
and it
detached garage.
decreases the amount of God, the term, water can't get through,
Impervious
impermeable,
surface.
yeah, it decreases the amount of that we would be requiring.
Yeah, cause I think, I'm even thinking of a recent application where it's gonna look so unique to have this huge driveway all the way to the back, and the guy's putting the detached garage
Mhm.
in the rear of the yard, as he is required to be. That's gonna be a very long driveway back there.
Yeah, there's a house behind my mom's.
Or maybe if
Green.
the property doesn't have an alley in the rear, there's another
Yeah.
guardrail for it.
I think he brought the people's.
Oh,
Cause
that's a
it's
good
two
one, yeah.
houses, I think there's two houses behind it, and he had to buy the land to put the detached garage in the back, so he owns now the other people's, or unless they just let him do it, but I always thought it was weird, cause it's right behind, it's Uncle Bill Payne, and just like, why is his garage, like, why do you get to his garage from other people's yards? Well, there's no
Like,
alley.
got a bit like an easement or something?
Yeah, but that's, I guess that's why.
Yeah.
Well, let's, internally, we'll
Yeah,
kind
I-
of ponder about this one, but I think the feedback is good. I think there's an openness from the planning commission to relax the standards there. And then we can coordinate with city staff on potentially some guardrail provisions or regulations, and then we can bring those back as part of the next draft. Or if staff feels it's important to bring forward to a planning commission before that next draft, you can always come forward as an item as well. Let's talk about community gardens. Let's do it. So, the next question is, should community gardens be allowed as a standalone use, a primary use?
Yes.
or accessory. So, I think we just got like kind of these three follow-up questions. If so, where? That's always the big question. Where would they be allowed? Would you allow accessory structures on site if there's no primary structure on site?
I would.
That's a big
where I put a smiley face on that.
that's a big question, because if it's a community garden, there might not necessarily be a primary structure there, but you would have accessory structures like a shed. And then should there be performance standards, hours of operation, noise requirements, access? So I would love to hear your thoughts.
So I just gave like an hour-long presentation on food insecurity in town last Saturday.
Let's go to 9, let's do it. Give us the presentation.
Okay, so I'm gonna send a file over you might know, but, so one of the big things that I did talk about was about community gardens and the role that they can play in addressing food insecurity in Middletown. So I definitely think that this should be, yes, a standalone, land use, and that considering the importance that it can play in kind of turning the tide with the local economic development, you know, maybe it's not in the traditional sense, but you know, if we can grow food here, then people have to spend less money on food when times are rough, and it helps build that social community, that's the real bedrock of a town. We should be doing everything that we can to try and support, community gardens, from a legislative standpoint. So it's not like a blank check, but like if one of the, if there is a problem with like having like a primary use without a primary structure, then yeah, I think that should be something where this is like one of the few, if only, like land uses where you can have an accessory structure without a primary. And I see community gardens as having a huge role in Middletown's future in like a do or die kind of way, where the community won't survive without them, come 50 years. So that's kind of my take on that. Should performance standards such as hours of operation and noise be applied? I mean, yes, but I don't really see people working at like, at these gardens outside of, you know, like the typical range of the day, like nobody's doing night gardening like in other communities,
Well, it's just
which I'm sure they do.
They
but-
do, and it's a
I say
fail,
I
it's a
have.
fail safe, so it's,
Yeah,
so
it's safe,
if
It's
you-
an
if you-
enforceability.
If you live next to it, no one's out there,
Yeah.
they get a green thumb at 3 in the morning to go plant something.
Mhm.
So,
I think it's okay, cause if you have, I mean, you get if we're gonna do a little structure on there, just have 8 hours of operation, which you can. I mean, I have utilized 2 of the community gardens here in town, and it does. I mean, I think it would be okay, just to respect the people who live there, cause, I mean, I'll be honest, there's been times where I've had my car turned so I could see, and then like, oh, is my light shining on the homes that are across the alley, you know, so I think it would, just to be respectful.
Yeah, of course.
what about other commission members? What are the thoughts on this?
I don't really have a problem with doing anything. Otherwise, I think it's a minor issue. I don't think we have that many
Yeah.
mini
That's
gardens here in
the-
town.
That's
I
the
only know
point,
three.
we can change the legislation to encourage and support them.
I
You can
would
change it
say-
to allow it, though, I'm not sure you're gonna encourage it
I would say
with these items.
I
If
would
it's easier to
want-
get it off the ground, that's helping.
I would really want to see if we were going to, and we already allow them
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
full transparency.
Mhm.
Having a guardrail on there in terms of having somebody that we can contact
Yeah, of
that
course.
is fully in charge, because if these become overgrown,
Mhm.
they are now becoming a nuisance to the city rather than helpful to the
Just
residents.
like the
For-
one downtown.
From the,
From-
you go first.
I was gonna say, from the native plant enthusiast standpoint, you gotta define what overgrown is, and it's gotta be in a species way, because we are living through the 6th mass extinction in the planet's history. We're seeing incredible biodiversity loss of plants and insects. So like, what is overgrown? I don't think that it is possible for a native ecosystem to be overgrown, cause that is just an intact ecosystem. But if we're talking
More so,
invasive
I would
species,
say
like,
collectively caring for it.
with
So,
our-
yeah,
Yeah,
so there
you're
needs to
not
be some
watering or
standards, you
taking
know,
it.
like if you have a bed that is just native plants or something, it needs to be mowed 2 feet from the curb consistently to prevent plants from coming over that line, you know, that's a pretty common standard for that
And I
kind of
think
thing.
we're gonna have, I think there'll have to be a sweet spot. I mean, I think that we could go down a rabbit hole in regulation to where it would be over-regulated, and I understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
It would be over-regulated to where it'd be, no one will want to do it.
Mhm.
So yes, I think that there's some ways we can keep it at the 30,000 foot
like-
level with some parameters, some box to stay in.
We have we have other ordinances for property maintenance that
Mhm.
these should absolutely be upheld to in terms of weeds and mowed grass and stuff like that. That is the whole purpose of having that contact on file, so that way
Mhm.
somebody's property or this community garden doesn't get posted.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That way we can reach out and say,
It's
hey,
very enough.
Claire, your community garden, it looks like there's 6-foot tall weeds, thistles
Mhm.
growing there.
Mhm.
Please go get rid of those.
Yeah.
Instead of,
Mhm.
there's a stake in the ground with a yellow notice of violation. I think that.
Yeah, and like I said, like I think there's a difference between having a lot of the infill lots in town that aren't maintained. They are overgrown, as in they are infested by invasive species that propagate, and they kill the local flora, that's there just by straight out competing it, but, I think that having an ecocidal focus or ecocidal standards is going to be a net detriment to town. And it is one of those things where it's like, gotta have guardrails, gotta have accountability, but we need to be going off of like a naturalistic based approach on this particular thing, because we are dealing with the environment, with nature, and not an aesthetics based one, but that's just my opinion.
And I think it gets down to the fact that the code would support these uses coming in, but not actively like enforcing encouragement of it.
Mhm.
And I think if we can craft some standards, I think we can achieve what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And we can work with city staff to come up with those parameter guardrails. And just stay, I really would highly suggest stay away from getting too prescriptive.
Mhm.
I think we'll run into some issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
And
good.
I agree, just wanted to put my,
Yeah, no, this is,
Yeah.
and this is the whole purpose of these, is to have this open dialogue and to talk through this. So that when things come forward in the next rounds, the next drafts, it's not surprising, we've talked about it, and that makes the process smoother. Let's tackle this next one.
I'll let everybody else talk first.
So, accessory dwelling units, yes. Claire, would you like to lead us
I
off
would-
on this
sure,
discussion, and then we
sure.
can supplement?
So accessory dwelling units, these have become more of a planning fad, if you will, but they seem to have some longevity to it. These became popular, I think, maybe I was graduating college, maybe a little sooner than that. But essentially, you have a primary structure on a property, so a house, let's say single-family dwelling for the purposes of the city of Middletown. And I have this really old detached garage in the rear that is 800 square feet. I never use it, but I have a daughter who is a traveling nurse, and she needs a permanent residence. And that I could retrofit that for her, where she has a permanent residence to call home. She's not paying absurd rents with Airbnb, she's not renting by the week, whatever it may be. So I come to City of Middletown, I say, I wanna turn my detached garage into this accessory dwelling unit, and city staff will tell you, oh, well, it's not permitted at this time. Or, there's also the other option of what I think really the city, could do is, the construction of these without retrofitting, like a detached garage or something. So they're like miniature homes, some call them granny flats, some call them the mother-in-law suites. So there's a variety of terms for them, but in surrounding municipalities, I think in Cincinnati, I don't think Hamilton permits them currently.
I don't believe so.
But more of your larger metropolitan areas, they are permitting these, to address the some housing issues. Whether it's, your mother-in-law wants to come live with you and you don't necessarily want her in the house, or, not my mother-in-law though. Or your son or daughter, has a traveling job where they're home maybe 6 months out of the year and they just don't wanna live out of a suitcase. So there's definitely multiple tactics you can take. Obviously our consultants are from California, so where these are wildly popular, I would say Middletown is not California. But there's a discussion point of, if we were to allow accessory dwelling units, how would the commission approach that? And what are the considerations that you guys would wanna have for these units?
And I think the questions we have up there, if there were standards for accessory dwelling units, almost all those questions would have to have a standard one.
It does.
It would need to. But we'd like to hear from the commission on this, because this currently is not an allowed use, it's not listed, and whether this is something to consider. You wanna start us off?
Yeah, cause then, well, in my line of work with housing, it still wouldn't be considered permanent residence, so, some people wouldn't be allowed to use it. Because it has to, I forget what it has to have, or be changed, it will still be seen as a garage and inhabitable. But then I guess if you are turning into unit B if they do the proper protocol, I guess it would change, I guess we would look at that.
It would.
Because you would change it, so I guess it would.
It would change, so it would change to a habitable space, you would still have to come and get the proper permits to do it, building, all that stuff would have to apply.
I would hope people would do that. My worry is would people not do that?
Right.
Because now we've allowed it so, because we have so many people that, oh, what's allowed, so I don't wanna pay all that. And so they just, kinda like when the pools came up, when the pool went away and people started getting pools, not realizing that you have to have someone from the city come, make sure that the electrical outlet is so certain, like all those regulations and stuff, and people just start popping up with pools and, gates, so that's what I worry about, but just, being heavy on, the allowed use, land use, and then, I like it, having to have the homeowner live on the property. I think so because of liability. If you have two renters there and this structure wasn't really structured for, housing, you run into more issues. And then parking. Oh yeah, you took the parking away, so what the parking?
That's a question, researching jurisdictions in Ohio that have started to pull this in require replacement parking.
Cause we
Other
do-
places don't,
Oh.
but they do require replacement parking, so if you get rid of the garage, you gotta rent the parking, so you're essentially having to rent it somewhere else. So, because essentially you're adding more people, there's more vehicles most likely. And it also gets into setbacks, it gets into height, it gets into how does it look, does an ADU still have to comply with the residential design standards?
And these are.
And these are the big questions that we wanna start to flesh out and take the temperature of the planning commission to see, is this even, Ohio hasn't passed a law on these, have they yet?
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, we're gonna use the term yet, cause I could see that happening.
And is it?
So right now, it's an optional use.
Okay.
It's not a requirement. And so I'd be curious to go down the line what others think about accessory dwelling units. And we can also pull other local jurisdictions, if you were looking for actual examples of how other communities handle it, we can do that as well.
I've never thought about it, and I've been involved with these commissions for a dozen years, and never come up.
Meanwhile, I joined so I could try and get them in, but,
It's another form of housing that is deemed affordable.
Mhm.
It's another option. These aren't sold, they're rented.
I mean, I have no
rental.
objection to it, I just hadn't thought about it before.
It's unique.
It is, yeah.
In addition to Claire, you brought the use case of students, but it's also an opportunity for aging in place.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're getting into smaller footprint housing technologies.
So I could move my wife out into the.
I think she'd move you
Garage.
out. I think
Yeah,
that would
it-
work.
they're called ADUs, but yours would be called adult.
She might even go a step farther and put them in the
That's
shed.
gonna be you, Roger.
Yours has a
That's gonna be you.
sink, huh?
But you don't even need that. Go act like it's 1900 and go use the outhouse. Use the outhouse. Get a bucket and keep your water, make sure you get it.
See, my father took me to the woodshed a few times, maybe.
For me, I'm definitely leaning a little bit more, I don't know, radical with my implementation of it. I've seen where these have been implemented, you know, in other states and in other countries. And like, in some places, they will actually allow the ADU to be taller than the primary structure. Is that the right thing for Middletown? I don't think so. But I think that that is definitely an interesting approach to the soft, soft density. I mean, like, I think that overall, yes, in favor. This is something that I really want, something that I really want to push for. I think it would be beneficial overall for Middletown. And then, like, let's think about this from the context of like a family that just moved in and they wanna convert their house to a garage. So you've got the potential of this accessory dwelling unit not even being like dwelling, it can even just be like a flexible space for the family to like have an office or like the kid's gaming room or something while they're growing up. Then you move into like the kid turns into a teenager, that's their room, they get their own little bit of independence while they're out there. You know, they're learning some of those soft skills. Later on it becomes, you know, dad's work from home office, dad ages out, kids move into the main house, mom and dad move into the grandmother's suite, and then that cycle kind of goes on. Yes, it's an age in place type of thing. Definitely, you should not be able to rent it unless the homeowner is residing in the primary structure, and I think there definitely needs to be teeth on the consequences for that, because if there's not, then it'll just be abused. Something that I don't see on here that a lot of municipalities have wrestled with is, do we require grid attachment for sewer and for electric? Or are they allowed to be off grid? Are they allowed to go off of the house, so they have to have their own line that comes to it? So those are things to consider as well. I think that can probably be done contextually, based off of the infrastructure that's already in place.
You're heading the
I
California
was like,
direction.
you just made a whole apart. You just made a house, like. you
Yeah,
just
it's a
made-
small house.
You just
It's an
made
accessory dwelling unit. These are things to
506A and
consider.
506B, you just created
Yeah.
that, yeah.
That's essentially what ADUs
But
are
that is,
meant
that's
to
what
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
It's a flexible
But it has to be,
accessory.
if you're
dwelling
making
unit.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
And that
you're
changes
getting-
it from being,
You're getting into connections
Mhm.
and.
Yeah, but I think it's something to consider.
A lot of that's gonna be covered with our building inspection division and how Ohio building code is set up.
Mhm.
And how if it's something truly inhabitable, you have to have
Yeah,
electricity.
yeah, of
and
course.
water.
But is it allowed to be off grid, or does it have to be connected to the grid? That's one of the things
well,
I see
didn't they just
people a
require
lot.
it in Middletown, isn't that why Leperson now is on the sewer line?
Oh, you can't be on like a septic?
Yes, yeah,
Oh, I don't know.
I don't remember, but I think it was
And
something.
There's,
Then
there's like a
there's
will
the-
serve ability, like,
Oh.
if you're in our jurisdictional limits, there's a lot of complexities about, utility capacity and like, to be on the grid.
And I do wanna play devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah.
Because bringing up a topic like this, which would be completely new to Middletown, having, dealing with this on a whole different level, but having written regulations in other places, the question you will get will be, well, my neighborhood is no longer single family anymore. because what you're technically inviting is multiple units in now. So you're going away from a single unit. Essentially now it's 2 family units.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that it's from a character perspective can really change an area. And I'm not saying that to advocate for this or not advocate for it. I'm just laying out what you will most likely hear as planning commission and staff. And is the city ready for that? Because that will be the question. Well, now it feels more like a multifamily environment now, and it's starting to change, and where are all these people gonna park, and where are they gonna be? And that will come up, I guarantee.
Oh,
And so those
for
are
sure.
things I just want to just think about as we're having this discussion, because that will undoubtedly be a topic.
Well, and certain ways to regulate that too would be by zone, so we can allow these and restrict them by
That's what I was
zoning
thinking, yeah.
districts. So we could, if we saw this more as a multifamily typology, we could throw it into those zones that are more oriented or allowed, that would allow a 2-unit dwelling, and this is kind of like that.
Yeah.
A lower intensity version of that, so we could remove it from one, make it conditional and some other residential zones, we have that steering wheel.
I see what you're saying, but I just feel like when you're talking about what is the best, like, the best environment where the soft density is more needed, and it's gonna be in the neighborhoods that are gonna be the most opposed to this, honestly. It's another one of those kind of do or die things, as far as I'm concerned, for Middletown's long term, but, yeah, is the city ready for it? You know, it can always be one of those things where it's
Well, it
expanded.
exists.
Could there be consideration that if this is a 25% increase to the livable space, that there's a requirement for a 25% increase to the lot size? To kind of counterbalance, maybe it's more designated for the larger lots in those specific zoning districts. That way it's not so much
But then how do you,
cramping.
how do
You
you
have to
deal
do
with existing?
Did you have to do a
Yeah.
subdivision or a?
Cause that's where, I think that's where it's gonna be geared.
Well, if the lot, say the minimum lot's 10,000 square feet, but there's lots in that R4 that's 12 or 14,000 square feet, those ones would be more conducive for,
So only those lots would be able to have ADUs, but the 10,000 square foot lots wouldn't.
as a potential.
See, then I feel like.
You
if
take the
you-
whole
if you-
purpose
yeah,
away
you're-
for
you're
why they
punishing
need
the
it.
property owner that didn't.
Mhm.
That
Like
doesn't
whose
make a lot.
parcel was
needs it?
plotted back in 1960.
Yeah, back when this concept didn't even exist,
Yeah.
you know, so. I mean, these are all things to consider, and, you know, I'm not saying that it's gonna happen exactly the way that I want it to, but I really do think that, like, getting accessory dwelling units as something that is like permitted, even if it's at first in like these higher density, residential zones like you suggested, and then if they catch on, if they become popular, then you can expand it, but like, the places that are going to have the space to actually build these are going to be the ones that are the least, or the less dense, zones, you know?
Well, then it comes into play, does the ADU have to match the setbacks of the base zoning district, or would it have a modified set of setbacks for it? If it's
Most
in-
detached garages don't have the same setback as a house does.
But I mean, I'm just.
Yeah. No, because it is a dwelling unit now, so should it have the same standards as the primary dwelling unit, or should it have the standards of a detached garage? It's a great point. Obviously, if it's a retrofit, you can't move the whole building and
Correct.
foundation, but if it's a new build, I think that's definitely something to consider.
So there's a lot to chew
Mhm.
on this topic, which is why there isn't a section in the code there now. We talked about this internally and went, I think there's more questions.
We drafted one, and then
Yeah.
it was probably the best, we had this discussion.
Yeah, we took a first stab at coming up with standards that were, I think, trimmed down, but still got to it, and I think it opened up more questions about, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And it was like, okay, we need to flesh this out some more.
There's one more aspect of this to consider that I haven't even brought up yet, and that's, prefabricated ones that are just like, there are some municipalities that have just like pre-approved, like models that you can
Yes.
just plop in.
Mhm.
And I
Pre-approved
definitely think,
ADUs.
you know, Paul Horn is no longer on the city council, but I had a pretty good, long conversation with him about that. He was very much in favor of that. I can see that being one of the things that really gets the ball rolling on that here in town is, having the affordable, relatively affordable, like prefab ones.
So the
but-
intent of the prefab ones is that which is just different than here.
Mhm.
The intent of the prefab ones is to bypass planning and to go straight to a building permit. That's the intent, is that the
Pre-approved.
city pre-approves it and goes, you can drop that in,
Mhm.
get a building permit. I don't care about anything else. I don't think we're there
I
with
would
that
not.
yet.
Mhm.
But
And that's-
other,
are
but
there
other,
even
but other,
manufacturers
but other
for that
places,
nearby?
other places are testing that out.
Mhm.
But I don't know if that's the.
I mean, if we had design standards, if that unit were to meet the design standards, then you wouldn't preclude a prefabricated structure.
No, let me back up. For a single family dwelling, we allow pre-manufactured homes as long as they meet the setbacks and architectural standards and roof pitches
Mhm.
and everything that a traditionally built house would be required to meet. Where you get into prefabricated issues is with Ohio Building Code. And how does our building inspectors ensure the quality of home, the safety of that home
Mhm.
for the resident? Because that's really what these regulations are in place for, is to ensure every single resident has quality housing and it's safe. It's not meant to be the bad guy, it's to make sure that we don't have landlords that are absolutely taking advantage of those who can only afford X amount in rent.
Oh,
So-
I agree.
For Ohio standards, a lot of that's regulated. Prefabrication's typically the building code, the building reviews are done at the manufacturing facility.
Mhm.
So a lot of times they'll come with like their own placard and stamp that's it's per HUD regulations at the
Mhm.
federal level, but it doesn't get in the nuances of the state or at the local level that, you know, a stick-built would.
Mhm.
Obviously pros and cons to it. I think
So
regional sentiments
could
make
the,
sense.
and this is probably getting beyond the scope of
Sure.
zoning, but, so theoretically, we could have standards that are in line with the federal HUD standards that, assuming that they don't contradict the Ohio, standards, that then, you know, as long as these prefab meet those HUD standards, then, you know, just an idea. You know, and then there's always the retrofits and then the people that build them from scratch, you know. So it's the beauty of ADUs to me is that there's just so many options because it's adaptable, you
Mhm.
know. So that's why I love them.
Would any of this include mobile homes?
No.
No, because it kind of looks that way.
No, it wouldn't include mobile homes or
Yeah.
RVs.
Or tiny homes or anything like that. All the tiny homes can be, you
Tiny
know,
homes can
ADUs,
be
but
ADUs
that.
I was
if
like,
they're,
hey,
Yeah.
if they're
aren't
not
they-
on a movable trailer.
Mhm.
A tiny
Yeah.
home could be on a foundation.
I
Yeah.
was saying that, 'cause
Yeah.
that's what they got 'em
That's
on
kind of
top
where I
of
got
them.
into like I said, I like to watch a bunch of DIY content on YouTube, you know, I love watching people build their homes and stuff. I haven't even gotten into like standards for earth-built homes, dream one day, not anytime soon, but. Yeah, put a pin in that.
This is probably back to this, like, my first time at the planning counter when I was a planner. And it was this question, and it was came with building materials, and some guy came in with a bucket, it was a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket, with straw and mud. And this was his, like, proof that he wanted to say, like, this is a good building material. And I remember as a planner being like, what on earth am I doing? Like, what? And I'm talking to this guy about, like, different earth form structures and if it's building code. I had no idea. I was like, I'm a planner, I'm not a builder, but
It's
use
beautiful.
to
Yeah.
this
I don't know if
bucket
the
of
California Building Code allows that.
straw
Yeah.
and mud. And he was like, I'm
Wow.
gonna build my home out of this. and
Adobe
these
bricks.
four.
Yeah.
It was-
Yeah,
yes,
Adobe
it was
bricks
like-
and cob,
it
you
was-
know.
Yeah, it was cob, it was a
Yes.
cob house.
Yeah, they're you know, they're the real deal, especially with modern building standards, you know, that's, but that is beyond the scope of
Yeah,
where we
yeah.
need to look at right now.
So I think what we can do is we'll mull over this a little bit more. We can bring forth examples. I think finding local examples is important. I can appreciate being not living here. I can appreciate the outlook at like different areas,
Mhm.
but I think some of the areas are a bit more progressive than Ohio is doing right now. I'll end this ADU discussion. We had a meeting last night in a jurisdiction in Southern California, and our new ADU laws now allow 3 units by right on top of your single family. And the units can be upwards of 1,000 square feet,
Go as close.
4-foot setbacks, and they can be in the front, side, and backyard, and cities have no control and no parking
No
requirements.
parking
No
requirements.
parking.
No parking requirements.
No parking requirements and no design requirements. So that's as liberal as it gets.
Yeah.
But I can
That's-
tell you.
That's like.
Why
Oh,
is
and
it
you
not
can- And
regulation?
you can do a
That is
separate
statewide.
conveyance, so you can
Statewide.
you can sell the ADUs
You can sell
separate,
them too.
And on the property.
but on the same property.
Yes.
So you essentially, you can condo
Whose idea, who thought that was?
It gets really fun, and then.
Are they trying to sabotage it? They don't care about where they live at, right? Whoever
Well, and
they
it's,
do.
so that you can do an attached ADU, a detached ADU, a converted ADU, or a junior, which is a bedroom.
out.
Yeah, a junior, you can basically convert a bedroom without a kitchen and.
I mean,
And then people are selling for $500,000.
I was like, let's see how much they
Yeah,
sell.
but you see, we're not
This is
quite
not money.
in that
This is
dire
really-
straits
I'm
for
just seeing
housing, and I would
money.
like to avoid that in the
So,
future.
Yeah.
so I remember when we interviewed for this job, we had this conversation during the interview, and I was like, there's lessons learned that I really think you should
Don't
take into
go
consideration.
this route.
Don't go too far.
I think
Don't
the
do that.
maximum that you could put, like in Middletown, a maximum of 2, and that would be on like an R1
But
property,
essentially,
but that's not
single-family
even.
zoning
Mhm.
no longer exists.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Which I think that's gonna be quite a hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But.
I think it'll be a worthwhile
but
hurdle
here's-
to get over that.
Here's the last piece. New home developers are starting to build next-gen homes, which have ADUs in the homes already.
Isn't that just a room?
Yeah,
No,
no.
it has its own 1-car garage, its own
I
kitchen,
say
its
my
own front
my-
door,
They
and it's
built
attached.
it, even though they were told they couldn't live
So-
in there. It's off of, what is that, it's in Trenton /
Madison
Seven
Township.
Mile. What is that?
Madison Township?
No, it's going, well, it's,
That's where
that's
Oxford-
Jackson, it's near Jacksonburg, so not that way, but closer to Hamilton, because they have it in Hamilton address. And that's exactly what they built a cabin, but they just found out they're not supposed to live in the cabin.
Oh.
But they built upstairs their garage,
Yep.
an ADU.
Or what we're seeing now too are tri-level homes, where the bottom floor is the ADU with the tandem garage,
I
and
have
then the
a
house is on
tri-level.
and the house is on the 2nd and 3rd floor.
Well, I
Actually,
could
don't
see
you
that.
Rent the bottom floor out.
You know what, I guess I could create a wall.
It's different from a two-family.
It just,
I could create
it gets
that.
streamlined.
Square footage requirements.
Square
I could tell my
footage.
girl I'm gonna create that, so she don't have to ever leave.
But we could be here forever talking about this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we should.
let's-
She'll want to leave.
Let's round this out on the definitions discussion, because you
Okay.
all have been fantastic. It is 8:15.
Sorry, it is?
Yeah.
My
So,
son's already. I was like,
Claire-
Take my wife out to dinner.
oh my goodness.
Claire's like, I know it's 8:15.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yep, so said mom.
Where are you? So let's round it out with some definitions. Let's do it.
All right, so 12:30, as mentioned earlier, because we looked at land uses, because we're overall looking at terms and clarifying, we took a pass at updating some of the definitions. We wanted to provide this to you all so you could see when you're going through the land uses, the associated permit requirements, you can see what we're actually,
You brought the pizza,
what
you
we're
got
actually.
beer too?
I didn't
So
didn't
our
bring
key
that.
recommendations and changes for 12:30, we've added some new land uses, therefore we've added some new definitions. Some of these include defining what an animal is, small versus large. We've redefined or refined, I would say, the cannabis marijuana definitions, grouping those together and deferring out, where applicable, ORC. We also provided further clarification on caustic and hazardous materials. That's really gonna be important when we start to get into the potential of expanding our industrial and service types of uses. We wanna be able to restrict certain activities, so we've brought in this definition. As mentioned earlier, we looked at kind of re-envisioning how we apply dwelling units, and so that allowed us to refine the the definitions for dwelling units, and the various typologies, and then motor vehicles, which was an important definition to bring in. So our questions are really just general. I'm sure they're really just here for your reference, but on your cursory review, did they seem, our modifications seem adequate, or are there definitions or terms that you have found in the course of your review, as part of a review authority, that you found would be beneficial to bring in that we have not brought in?
I didn't review this part, sorry, so.
I also did
I
not.
mean,
I didn't use
You put in the cannabis and marijuana. Of course, right now, hemp is really a big issue. Should that be part of that too, somehow in the definition?
Like hemp-derived products?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever that's called.
'Cause if that's, if we do
HC, whatever
include
it is.
Oh, no,
that
cause we're not supposed to be
in,
selling, but isn't it, didn't it just get
Well,
banned at the
Yeah.
sale?
Part of that's the regulations, the states crack down on it, to, like, the Delta 8 was a
Right.
big thing, gas stations were selling. If marijuana was measured in units of 1, Delta 8 was like 0.9. That's the
Yeah.
best way I can like,
Mhm.
it's close, but wasn't officially cannabis.
Mhm.
I think the state had made new regulations to change that, to make it all kind of conform, to pull those out of the gas stations and make sure they're being sold at, marijuana dispensaries. When it relates to like non-THC containing hemp, I mean, probably more similar to agriculture or textile. If you're thinking in like the application of like fabrics and that sort of stuff, I don't,
No, I was thinking about
Or
the,
cotton.
the Delta 8s.
yeah.
or cob.
I wasn't talking about rope either, or
Yeah,
any of that
there
kind of
you go.
stuff.
Well, I think the state's worked to strengthen a lot of that. I don't know if there is something at the local level, maybe we could dive into.
But it may back down a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know, you got alcohol and all that sort of thing, it's gonna be regulated very similar, I would think.
Yeah, so maybe seeing what the ORC's latest
Mhm.
nomenclature has been for the .9 marijuana.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the term that's being used in Ohio is hemp-derived products.
Thank you.
So that's the key term to look into for the ORC, when talking about the knotweed, you know? Not to be confused with knotweed, which is an invasive species, but,
Ah, just got that. Yep. Okay.
Well, we
Right.
made it. So I think just to go over what our next steps are, we're gonna take the feedback tonight, work with city staff to, disseminate it a bit more, come up with, what's known as a preliminary draft that'll then become a public review draft. You will see us again, but not for a little bit, so April timeframe. At that meeting, we're planning on bringing back the what we call general development standards. So your signs, landscaping, parking, we're gonna take a look at the residential, non-residential design standards, take a pass at those for objectivity, so there's no subjectiveness in there, which is very important when the staff goes to evaluate projects and you as commission and council review them. So that's scheduled for, actually it's not tentative anymore, it is April 23rd. After that, we will take the feedback from those sections, pull everything together into a public review draft. That public review draft will go out for public to consume, look over, and that's when we would have another workshop, which is not tentatively anymore, that is actually June, it is June 11th. We'll also be working with local interest groups, those are still to be determined. We'll scope to have individual meetings with local interest groups to explain the new code, its impacts, what to expect. Following the public review draft, we would come back to Planning Commission in July. And in July, we would bring you the public review draft to go through one more time and all of the community feedback received. And that's where we would make any other adjustments or modifications that the Planning Commission would like to see. Following after that would be the hearings, so hearings would begin into the fall. So that gives you a timeline. We're probably about 9-10 months out from adoption, but this outlines next steps.
Yep. Do you guys have any questions?
So if I do have stuff that I want, can I email you and you'll forward it to them, or?
Yeah, I think For the
Like-
purpose of collaboration, if there's really big ideas,
Mhm.
hold it for old and new business to bring up during that time. That way the entire commission is,
Mhm.
because obviously you can send stuff to me, I can send this
Yeah.
right back out to planning commission. But when there's big discussions to be had, I wanna make sure everybody is really present and has a voice. And again, you know, planning commission, city staff, planning commission is gonna take it so far. But again, please remember that city council has the ultimate determination on what's in that final approved document, so. You know, I think setting up stuff that is very consensus building is gonna be key to getting a final draft adopted, so.
Yeah, I didn't wanna mention this during, but like a year ago, I actually did like a whole page of edits I would do to 1206, and I found them again today when I was looking through stuff, so I might have some stuff in here that's actually worth,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll send you an email with.
Yeah, for more direct edits,
Yeah.
absolutely, but when there's like those bigger planning
Yeah.
topics such as.
And I'll probably have a similar deal with some takes on revising landscaping requirements. As you probably gathered from tonight, I'm very ecologically focused, so, but that's something that is definitely best talked about with the whole commission.
Yeah.
That's, you know, the idea's gotta get onto paper at some point, so.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
And, does anybody have anything else?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, we will go ahead and adjourn the special meeting. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.